thought squatting behind a gravestone in a cemetery could be so comforting. We saw a group of 4 or 5 cloaked figures circling the property. There was a well-known mansion at the top of a hill. It was especially creepy because it stood at the edge of a massive cemetery. Chaz and I looked down at the rock that had just landed on the gravel in front of us. The exact same rock Chaz had just thrown. He flung the door open. Before I could even see anything, I was struck by the smell that made me take a few reactionary steps backward. It was disgusting. It smelled like death and rot. The sight was even worse than the smell. We found ourselves staring at a tiny room, the floor of which a white pentagram was painted. There were a few unlit candles and a closet door that we didn't open. The smell seemed to be emanating from that closet. I looked down the staircase and saw 2 cloaked figures looking back up at me. And the second I made it onto the roof, I heard the door forcefully open. "They went that way," yelled a freakishly deep voice. I never It was Halloween night of 2007, freshman year in high school, and I was with my friends Ivan, Ryan, and Jesse. We were all dressed as the Super Mario characters. I was Luigi since I was the second tallest. Ivan was Mario since he's short and buff. Not that Mario is buff. Jesse was Waluigi because he's freakishly tall and skinny, and Ryan was Wario because he's just really fat. So they were the perfect group costumes for us. We live in a very non-congested suburban neighborhood with a decent amount of space in between houses. On Halloween, that's the worst thing ever. Less bang for your buck. We were trick-or-treating for hours, way past dark, and eventually came the time when most trick-or-treaters were heading home. My feet started to hurt, and I had to constantly switch arms for holding the now 10-pound pillow sack of candy, but we planned on going until our bags were completely full. A lot of the houses by now weren't answering anymore. It was probably past their cutoff time for giving candy to trick-or-treaters. Approaching our next house, we saw a purple bucket on the stoop, which was the best feeling ever. I was the one to get close enough to realize it was empty, which was the worst feeling ever. I turned around when I heard a knock at the window of the house. We all looked at the window. Couldn't see anyone, but heard someone call out, "Wait." The door opened and an older man, late 40s, already balding, stepped outside. He told us to come inside so he can get us some more candy. I said we could just wait out here. He responded saying something along the lines of, "Nonsense, come on in, we'll get you your candy." Ivan stepped in and said, "It's alright. Come on Dan, let's go." I told the guy to take care and apologized. He just stood there watching as we walked off, not saying anything. I felt bad, but at the same time, that guy seemed like a creeper, and I figured I just dodged a bullet not going in there. If the story ended there, it wouldn't be scary, so of course it didn't end there. We skipped a few of the guy's neighboring houses just to get further away and continued on with our business. We were walking down close to the nature preserve now, so there weren't many houses around us. At this point, we were now walking back closer to Jesse's house. I noticed Ryan had stopped walking, and I turned around to see what's up. He said he heard someone moving from behind the trees in the preserve. Now this was before everyone's phones had flashlights, so we couldn't just go searching in the woods for someone. Besides, we were just telling Ryan that it must have been a raccoon or something. You may think this is a bit of a cliche, but when things like this happen in real life, you always assume the more logical possibility. It's just natural. Why would we assume we were being followed? I had to put my arm around Ryan's shoulder and nudge him forward. A little ways down the street, me and Ivan picked up on the sound as well. When we all stopped, the sounds of the footsteps from beyond the trees stopped as well. Ivan yelled at the obvious stalker to go away, or we would beat the shit out of them. I knew he was just bluffing though. I could hear the nervousness in his voice. The snap of a twig from beyond the trees triggered a fight-or-flight response in all of us. Me, Jesse, and Ryan all ran for it. Ivan was at first charging to attack, but he quickly followed after realizing we had all taken off. We ran down the dark street, and we all noticed the sounds of at least 2 or 3 pairs of footsteps crushing the twigs and leaves in the woods. We banked it hard right down Jesse Street when it finally came up and ran straight for his backyard, entering his house through the back door. The first thing we did was peek out through his living room window. We couldn't see anyone. We all had to gather our thoughts and discuss what the hell just went down in his living room, when all of a sudden we heard Jesse's backyard gate slam shut. Jesse dove to turn off the lights. There was a click and a bang from down in the den. It was more than likely Jesse's back door. We all agreed to go down armed with knives and face them. Jesse turned on his back door light, but there was nobody out there. Just then the front door opened, and we all screamed like animals. Jesse's mom and sisters came rushing downstairs. They had just gotten home from their friend's little house party. We all rested assured knowing it was just them. Jesse explained what happened, but made it seem a lot less dramatic. Me and Ivan went home after that and called it a night. At 12:30 a.m., I got a disturbing text message. It was from Jesse. It said, "It wasn't my mom." I texted back saying, "What?" He responded back quickly, saying, "It wasn't my mom in the backyard." My fingers slammed the buttons on my phone, responding back, "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before he finally told me that his mom and sisters said they never went in the backyard. I told him to immediately check the backyard from his upper deck. He had already done just that. He also told his mom everything, and she had already called the police. They didn't find anyone back there, but Jesse did mention the guy who invited us in while trick-or-treating. Nothing ever became of that, and nothing ever happened at Jesse's house again after that one Halloween night.
There are all kinds of people on YouTube. It's a place where anyone can vent to an audience or express themselves. That's why these stories of YouTubers turned killers are especially disturbing, as their video histories in a sense document their descents into madness. Elliot Rodger was an English vlogger known for creating videos in his car, often telling of his depression for not being able to attract girls and how life was unfair. In most of his videos, Elliot displayed narcissistic tendencies by expressing his confusion and why girls don't pay him any mind despite his self-described good looks, good personality, nice car, and sense of fashion.
I've been attending college in Santa Barbara for about 2.5 years now. And in those 2.5 years, I've experienced nothing but loneliness and misery. And my problem is girls. There are so many beautiful girls here, but none of them give me a chance, and I don't know why. I don't know why you girls are so repulsed by me. It doesn't make sense. I do everything I can to appear attractive to you. I dress nice. I'm sophisticated. I'm magnificent. I have a nice car. A BMW. Well, it's nicer than 90% of the people in my college. You know, I'm polite. I'm the ultimate gentleman. And yet, you girls, you never give me a chance. I don't know why.
On May 23rd, 2014, Elliot uploaded a video to his YouTube channel, once again complaining about how females would throw themselves at obnoxious men over himself, and that they would be punished for not showing him interest.
For the last 8 years of my life, ever since I've hit puberty, I've been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it. It's an injustice, a crime, because I don't know what you don't see in me. I'm the perfect guy. And yet you throw yourselves at all these obnoxious men, instead of me, the supreme gentleman. I will punish all of you for it.
That same day, Elliot made headlines for killing 6 people and injuring 14 near the University of California, Santa Barbara in the infamous 2014 Isla Vista massacre before taking his own life after a police pursuit. On that day, he stabbed 3 men in his apartment, and about 3 hours later, he drove to a sorority house, and after failing to get inside, shot 3 women outside and later shot a male student in a nearby deli. Elliot would later speed through Isla Vista and get into a gunfire exchange with police, suffering a non-fatal wound to the gut. During the police pursuit, Elliot would fire at the police from his vehicle and hit people with his car. After crashing into a parked vehicle, Elliot took his own life with the same gun he'd been using. Perhaps what makes this scarier than any other murder spree is that the fact that Elliot's final video shows him outlining the details about his upcoming attacks in an attempt to punish women for rejecting him and to punish sexually active men for living a more enjoyable life than his.
On the day of retribution, I am going to enter the hottest sorority house of UCSB. And I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde slut I see inside there. I'll take great pleasure in slaughtering all of you. You will finally see that I am, in truth, the superior one, the true alpha male.
After the video was made public, Roger emailed a lengthy autobiographical manuscript to approximately a dozen acquaintances and family members. The document, which he titled My Twisted World, was made available on the internet. In it, he described his childhood, family conflicts, frustration over not being able to find a girlfriend, his hatred of women, his contempt for minorities, and his plan for what he described as retribution. Elliot goes down to be perhaps the most well-known example of a YouTuber turned killer. Trey Sessler, better known as Lenscap Productions or Mr. Anime, was an anime and film enthusiast who once reviewed anime on YouTube.
Well, today I'm reviewing Maple Story. Let's get right to the Maple Story. There's a legendary tree that lives on Maple Island. Well, it used to live there. It was destroyed a long time ago.
Back in 2006, Trey was known for basically kickstarting the YouTube anime community with his reviews. He helped inspire some of the biggest names in the anime community, and was generally considered to be a very well-known personality on the internet. But somewhere along the way, Trey's videos transitioned from being about normal things like anime, video games, and even talking about guns, to videos about serial killers, killing animals, and using real guns. In February 2012, he announced that he was taking a break for 2 to 3 weeks to reward himself for his work.
This is just an update video to let you guys know that I'm going to reward myself with probably a 2 or 3 week break coming up here from YouTube videos, anime reviews in particular. I might do some blog stuff. I want to thank you guys a lot for sticking with me and watching the channel. I got more subscribers than ever. I have more views than ever, and everything is going really good.
On March 20th, 2012, Trey took the lives of his mother, father, and older brother Mark. After committing the act, he wrote on the walls, "Why did I do this? I love my mom, dad, and brother." Trey's fascination with guns was seen early on, but nobody could have ever suspected he would commit the heinous acts he did. Friends even described him as a highly intelligent and kind-hearted guy. Interrogations found that he had actually done what he did to his family to spare them from knowing that he planned to target Waller Junior High School, with his goal being to have at least 70 victims.
I would protect them with my life, but at the same time, if anyone was going to hurt them, it was going to be me. Or they were the first immediate human targets in my sight. And if I was going to go out and do anything, they would have to go. And I'm like, there's my opportunity. Go ahead, go get him.
A close friend of Trey's, Tyler Adams, claimed that Trey's mind had gone astray over the years, and the only true sign of his decline was that his videos and movies would get more and more violent as time passed. Once he was arrested, Trey was sentenced to life in prison. In late 2020, his channel was terminated. Samantha Walford is a former YouTuber who aspired to become an actress. Samantha was a mother of 5, married to her husband Ernie, whose relationship she documented in her YouTube videos. She would constantly complain about her husband working all the time, even though they had 5 children to support. She would also complain about his love for playing video games. In fact, the reason for their marriage was because in 2014, the couple got into a fight over Ernie's gaming character marrying a female character online, and so Samantha threatened to leave Ernie, but to end the battle, he asked her to marry him. Samantha would complain that there was no thrill in her life, and that she wanted to be a famous actress. On the night of February 20th, 2015, Samantha would give her 5 children high dosages of Ambien so that they could sleep through what was going to happen that night. Samantha had hired 3 men to kidnap and murder her husband. The 3 men would enter the home, and before abducting him, they would beat and whip Ernie in front of his wife. Ernie pleaded and begged them not to hurt his family during this process. No one listened. They then dragged him out to the middle of the woods where they killed him. Once an investigation went into place, Samantha was interrogated. However, police didn't buy her story. During the interrogation process, Samantha tried to point the authorities in the direction of Jonathan Sanford, one of the 3 kidnappers, claiming that she met him at the hospital while visiting a friend, and that he took offense upon hearing about her husband's abusive behavior. Sanford was arrested along with his brother Jose Antonio Ponce, and the 2 were charged with aggravated kidnapping. However, the 2 men were able to provide proof that Samantha was the mastermind behind the plan, along with a 3rd kidnapper, Octavius Rhymes.
Talking about her relationship with me and Tay and my sister-in-law and all that, and me trying to talk to her and help her out and all that, because she seems like a good person to me, and she was explaining to me how he treats the kids and all that. If I ever see it, or if I happen to be around, or if I ever see her with bruises or the kids with bruises, that. So yeah, I said I'd whoop his ass. I did say I'd hospitalize him. I'm gonna put you down and make sure you can't come back up and whoop my ass as I'm walking away.
Jonathan brings the sheriff to Ernie's body, a remote location in the woods. Ernie was in his boxers, having been beaten to the point that he was no longer coherent, right before Ponce shot him in the back of the head. The 3 men had initially planned to plant drugs in Ernie's vehicle and call the cops on him. However, things changed when Samantha requested that they just kill him. Samantha denied knowing the 3 men that did this, but her phone records would eventually prove otherwise, having been in contact with all 3 of them before the murder. Samantha was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Many believed that she did this for fame, while others thought that Samantha did this because Ernie threatened to leave her and take the children with him. Being a mother who put her children through neglect for a YouTube channel was clearly not something Ernie was willing to settle for. Randy Robert Stair, who called himself Andrew Blaze, was a YouTuber who worked at Weiss Markets. He had kept detailed videos, recordings, and journals leading up to what he'd eventually do on his YouTube channel called Pioneers Productions, but also to other social media profiles and online forums. In these uploads, he expressed his willingness to end his own life while addressing the personal tragedies he's experienced, which led him to a depression. He would also begin to question his gender identity.
The more I wore girl clothes, the more I felt like that was who I was. Like I felt like I was a girl, and I found out that I was. I was never meant to be a guy. I was just a female soul trapped in a man's body my whole life.
And as he continued his downward spiral, he would begin to provide detailed explanations of his plans for carrying out a shooting, and explained his belief that these murders would allow him to cross over to an animated world he'd imagined. Randy also had a concerning obsession with the Columbine High School massacre, and seemed to look up to the perpetrators Dylan and Eric as his heroes. Randy's YouTube channel featured short sketches and collaborations he had done with other content creators, but in 2014, due to a number of alleged unfortunate events that had happened in his life, Randy explained to his audience that he'd be taking his content in a different direction. This led to the creation of Ember's Ghost Squad, a series based on a fictional character from the Nickelodeon show Danny Phantom, due to his obsession with the character Ember McLean. On the night before the shooting, Randy uploaded a final video titled Westboro High Massacre. In it, he describes his hatred towards the people involved with the series because of how he believes they screwed him over. It then featured an animated sequence depicting him and one of the characters from Ember's Ghost Squad firing into a fictional high school, before ending with montages of previous videos explaining the motives behind the shooting.
But, my life's not been the greatest. We've all got problems. It's not just me. Everybody does. And then sometimes those things just make you make bad choices,
The next day, Randy arrived for his late night shift at Weiss Markets during closing time at around 11 p.m. Randy went to the back of the store to the crew area and blocked an emergency exit at the far back of the store. He then continued with his duties, stocking shelves and cleaning up from the previous day. Randy then went back to the crew area in the back of the store, blocked the remaining exits, then locked the automatic doors at the main entrance to the store. He then pulled out 2 shotguns that he had concealed in a duffel bag and walked around the store and took the lives of 3 co-workers. One co-worker who managed to survive and escape called the police, but by the time police had arrived, Randy had already taken his own life. It took me at least a second before I could realize he was choking me from the back seat. As a former Uber driver, I rolled down my window and called out Tom, and he called back yes, and walked slowly around the back, getting into the seat right behind me. When people sat right behind me, it just made me a little paranoid sometimes. The address he gave me was 10 miles away. By the 6-mile mark, things started getting uneasy in there. I was afraid to look into the rearview mirror. By the 8-mile mark, I started to realize we were in the middle of nowhere. There was less than a mile left in the drive now, still surrounded by nothing but woods with the occasional empty-looking building. I was approaching the dead-end street. As the street came up, I slowed down so I could get a good look of it. But nothing could be seen, just pitch blackness. I could only imagine why he wanted to get me out here alone. Instantly, he hopped out of his seat and yelled at me to turn around, so I apologized and did a quick 3-point turn. Thanks for the ride. I wasn't even thinking about money at this point. All of a sudden, I felt pressure on my neck. A 15-year-old girl named Sabrina was home alone one night when there was a knock at her front door. Her parents weren't supposed to be back until the following Monday, and she wasn't expecting any guests. She went to the front door to ask who was there, and an unfamiliar male voice said back, "Sabrina, there's been an accident. Your father's in the hospital." At first, Sabrina was about to open the door, but stopped herself and asked first, "Who is this?" The voice on the other side said, "It's a friend of your father." Sabrina asked what her father's name was, and the man responded correctly. Still showing caution, Sabrina went to call her father as the man at the door repeatedly knocked. When Sabrina's father picked up sounding completely fine, that's when she knew. Sabrina's father was perfectly fine. There was no accident. The knocks had stopped, and Sabrina's father called the police, but the unknown man was gone. Whoever it was someone who had some kind of intel on the family, from their names down to the fact that Sabrina was alone. The family never found out who the man was.
I moved to my dad's when I was 10, and I didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with. A single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple of years older than me. She was 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple of years. We weren't close, but we ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom, since she knocks a certain way when coming in, and he answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in. This is where I don't know the details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbor's house to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in a bathtub. She even hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. It happened to my wife's grandmother about 15 years ago while we were still dating. Her husband had just passed away about a year previously, but she'd been going down to the library and volunteering. It was exercise and socialization. This was in the winter, so her walk back was while it was getting dark. The library closed at 5 and there was some extra stuff to do before everyone actually left. And on this particular night, she turned down a ride from another volunteer because she needed to stay in shape. The house is about a mile away through some lightly wooded area in South Texas, and as she's about halfway home, she notices someone behind her. He's walking the same direction and gaining on her, which in itself isn't all that particular. She's old and thus not particularly fast, but in this case he seems vaguely sinister. They keep walking. Pretty soon he's right behind her. Then he falls into pace, just staying behind her. Now she knows something's up. But she's almost home. She can see the top of her driveway coming up, and she leaves her lights on so it'll look like someone's home when she's walking in. She just needs to make it another 150 yards, then 100. All that time, she said he was so close that she could feel his breath on her neck. Around maybe 50 yards, it happens. A strong hand on her shoulder. "Okay, bitch, don't turn around and hand over your purse or I'll cut you." She stops for a second, then takes one big step forward, turns, and shoots the guy in the neck with the .38 she keeps in her purse. The guy spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before he died of complications. My wife's grandmother passed last year, but up to the end, she lamented that she pulled the trigger too soon. When I was young, I'd say 8 to 11-ish, my sister, whom is 7 years older, would babysit when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside, play around, annoy her and such. One day, my sister notices a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting in the road. It's a white SUV with a bike rack on top. It has the most tinted windows I've ever seen. You could not see inside from the side. It sat there until she went inside, then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait until she'd come out again for another smoke, and it would repeat this. Odd, but my sister is a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day while my parents were out again and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. I know, because if I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window and it would just sit there and watch my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff deputy at the time, and he called the cops and made a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by and nothing. Then one day, a good 9 months after this had all started and around 4 months since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it comes. This time we were all alone as usual, and she decides she has had enough. She tells me to stay in the carport and she's gonna go confront them. She starts walking toward the SUV, and halfway down the driveway, she would later remark to us, "I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear." She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for the night. While my parents are home, my sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand, in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled towards it. The SUV floored it down the road and peeled out onto the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year and model and distinguishing features. The scariest thing, the license plate had been covered in duct tape. We never saw it again. I was just 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of the hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in her room, which was directly behind the bed above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. I should note her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and woke her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took me to wake her up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up at the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of the bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe that the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up so that the laundry room is split up from the other side of the basement with a wall and a door. In order to get upstairs, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. So the light blew in the other part, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty dark. I finished the laundry I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exit the laundry room, get halfway through the basement, and I hear a loud cackle. Imagine a sound people make when they imitate a witch. Take that and imagine the witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That's what I heard, clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate to bolt for the stairs. I waited until my father got home and then changed the bulb. I have yet to hear that cackle since, and I have not told a single person in the house about it. This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it about a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus in the morning. Minji was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and eventually she relented. They went back into her one-room apartment and she got into the bed while he laid a blanket out on the floor, and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some food." Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "Food? Now? It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed." But the student insists. "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he could fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. "There's a 24-hour place just down the road. Let's go there." Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under the bed for 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on the floor, so he had a clear view under the bed. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was all 2-lane road through total nothingness, except for a passing through Amboy. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley. So I was driving by myself in the afternoon and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I'm driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes. A suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere and two bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Something was just wrong. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it down, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it, or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple of 100 feet and slowed down, so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw that the two bodies had gotten up to their knees, and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the James River. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice fire going, accompanied by the usual idle talk and a few beers, when suddenly, everyone just stopped talking, like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the river and felt as if something, or someone, was staring back. It was a very uneasy feeling, to which some of the group tried to shake off with typical macho humor, when a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other shore that froze everyone in their tracks. The sound was unlike any other that I had ever heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate and tingle. The only way I could describe it is it sounded like a wild person with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly, a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first. By this time, several of us were sprinting to our trucks that were parked a few yards away, retrieving various firearms. When we got back, we all sat there quietly, with our eyes fixed staring toward the opposite shore, watching the light from our fire reflecting off the rocks. We sat there waiting for another scream, or something to move on the other side of the river. Finally, a third scream came just as suddenly, but this time, it was on our side of the river, coming from the bushes about a yard away. We all hightailed out of there, leaving most of our stuff behind. When we got to our trucks, we heard the scream one more time, just beyond the tree line. We all floored it the hell away from there, and never found out what was making the sounds. It was a Friday night, and my friend was picking me up in his car from my house. I was in a hurry since we were running late for the hockey game in the city. The whole car ride there, we were having such a good time that I hadn't even noticed that I didn't have my phone. I searched the car seat, the floor, but it wasn't in the car. I was sure that I had just forgotten it. During the hockey game, I couldn't stop worrying that maybe I had dropped my phone somewhere, so I borrowed my friend's phone and ran to the bathroom. I dialed my number and hoped someone at my house would pick up. It took 3 rings before somebody picked up, but they remained silent on the other end. I yelled into the phone that I was just checking if I had left my phone at home. They didn't answer. I assumed it was my little brother just messing with me, so I hung up. I got home late that night to see that my parents weren't home. I got inside my house and called them to see where they were. They told me that they had gone out to eat and see a concert at the park with my little brother. They said they left soon after I had for the game, and they should be home in around half an hour. So I hung up and proceeded to look for my cell phone. But then I realized, how could somebody in my family have picked up my phone if they hadn't been home? I felt a pain in my stomach as fear swept over. It was at that moment that I heard the back door to my house open and close. I immediately jolted out the front door to the neighbors and called the police. Apparently, the back door was left open and somebody had simply walked into our house. Nothing was stolen, but the scariest thing is the thought that we could have fallen asleep with a stranger in the house. A while back, there was a family that moved in next door to my family. They had a son who was just twisted. He was obsessive over slasher movies and always wanted me to talk about shit that happened during my time serving in Vietnam that no normal person would want to hear. He also loved tormenting stray animals. This guy was a whack job. He was 19 at the time and my daughter was 7, but he always wanted to talk to her. He'd strike up conversation with her when she walked home from school. He would talk over the fence at her when she was playing in the back. But what really set me off was when he called our house looking to speak to her. That was it. I went over and flipped shit at him and his parents. Told him to stay the hell away from her and I'd better not ever see him again. That's when things got weird. My daughter was always a little imaginative and paranoid. She would think there were monsters under her bed and whatnot, so when she told me there was something living in her closet and she was too scared to get up and tell us at night, but it wasn't there in the daytime, we blew it off as no big deal. A few weeks went by and one night my wife and daughter were staying at my mother's for a girls' night. So I turned the key on the HBO box and watched me some movies, eventually falling asleep downstairs. At around 2 a.m., I get a call from my neighbor with a creepy son telling me something along the lines of, "We saw that you were up, so we called. Our son is missing. I went by his room to use the bathroom and his door was open, which isn't usual, and there was no sign of him. We need help looking for him." The phone call woke me up though. I wasn't up, so I asked why they thought I was. "Oh, we saw you walking around upstairs and the light is on." My blood ran cold as ice. I'd been passed out on the couch and I know no one turned any lights on. I hung up on them, ran outside to my truck to grab my shotgun, but noticed the sheriff pulling up to my neighbor's house by this point. I booked it over and told him there was someone in my house, and now I could see the lights in my daughter's room were on, and there was a silhouette pacing back and forth. When the deputies went in, they found the neighbor boy there waiting in my daughter's room with a nice little setup in her closet. He said he liked to watch her sleep in the moonlight.
This is a little compilation of some pretty creepy videos I found on the internet the past couple weeks. A TikToker by the name of Eon June was exploring an abandoned nursing home one night for the thrill of it, planning to post it to his TikTok. Little did he know he'd capture more than he bargained for. In the darkness, he could see a figure further down the hallway walking across, and immediately knowing it looked like a person, he turned around and left. After getting home, he tweaked the brightness of the clip, and this was what he saw. So he returned to the nursing home later that night with a friend this time, recording once again, trying to catch something else on video in that same hallway. This is how that went.
I swear I saw something down there. Zoom in a little bit more.
I'm trying to.
Right there, right there, right there. See it?
Over.
What the? Oh, what the? I saw that. That was actually a person. Bro, I'm not joking. Let's get out of here. Come on.
Hold on. Do you mind?
No, dude, that's
Oh, yeah, now you're scared that there's...
That's actually a person.
The two are both apprehensive about moving further into the hallway where there was once again a black figure seen walking into one of the adjacent rooms out of
I
sight.
can heal him down. I'm not fucking playing.
I can't hear anything, dude.
You're an idiot.
You're fucking crazy.
No, I'm not. Guarantee you 100%. But walks past again, it's a real person. This, I'll throw it at him. Whatever it is.
As the two friends are making their way back out of the hallway, they hear a terrifying scream that barely sounds human, and the video cuts right there.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Hey, let's go.
Alright.
I know I saw something, and I know I'm not fucking crazy.
Security guards can see some pretty creepy things while working the overnight shifts. In this video, a security guard is left confused when he learns of a new employee he wasn't informed about. However, when he's shown the security footage capturing his perceived interaction with the new employee, he discovers something pretty terrifying.
Hey, watch this, y'all. This man, he called his boss asking him, why didn't y'all tell me they had a new employee, right? He constantly looking back, right? He talking to somebody, right? Just watch, this is creepy. Look, having a whole conversation with somebody, right? Saying that somebody came and he dapping that person off and everything. Now see, look, y'all see when he dapped them off, look what happened. He dapped them off, you see that shadow? And then the shadow goes over here and he pulling the chair out for him. He swore to God he sat there and had a whole conversation with this person. He moved over talking to him and everything.
This apparently isn't the only time this exact scenario has happened. In this next clip, which was filmed by a coworker of another security guard through a CCTV feed, the guard can be seen talking and gesticulating as though having a conversation with someone in one of the building's corridors.
Who is he talking to?
When asked by a coworker over the radio who he was talking to, the guard replied that he had been chatting with a woman named Miss Abigail, who had asked him about a man named Mr. Griffin.
Dispatch to 329.
329, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to a elderly lady. I saw her walking by the store and she said she's looking for Mr. Griffin. Her name is Miss Abigail.
Did you say Miss Abigail?
Yes, ma'am. She says she wants to see Mr. Griffin, and I told her that the canvas is closed, that she should come tomorrow morning, and she might see Mr. Griffin.
Are you sure you're saying Miss Abigail? Like, she's been passed on for 2 years now.
Come again with that, please?
Miss Abigail is, she died 2 years ago.
You mean you can't see the person I'm talking to?
No, there's nobody in front of you at all.
As his coworker quickly pointed out, however, Miss Abigail had died 2 years prior. In the comfort of his own bedroom, a young man is practicing piano, ironically the Silent Hill theme song, when he sees this. If you didn't see it, look closer at the reflection in the TV screen. A black figure can be seen sitting on the bed in the reflection of the TV, but when he turns to look, and when he turns back to the TV, the figure that was there 3 seconds ago is no longer there. Witnessing this while practicing the theme song to Silent Hill would surely be an unnerving experience, to say the least. A man starts to hear his wife's voice calling him from downstairs. The problem is, the man is home alone while his wife is away on a trip. She hadn't been home for 2 weeks at the time this was recorded, and he should have been home alone. Along with the calls from his wife's voice, there's the repeated sound of a door being slammed shut. A security camera in the house shows another angle capturing the door making this noise, being opened and closed seemingly by itself. And while all of this is going on, the rotating horse carousel music box in the TV stand starts playing music by itself. Some people suggest this could be a skinwalker, disguising itself as the man's wife. Others suggest it's just a straight-up demon, which was summoned by using the Ouija board also tucked in the bottom of the TV stand.
Alexa, turn on all lights.
Whatever it may have been, it sure made for a creepy video. The Kinect was a discontinued accessory for the Xbox 360 and Xbox One. It contained an active sensing depth camera using structured light and a color camera. It was intended to be used as a controller-free game controller, tracking the body or bodies of one or more players in its field of view. The Kinect is able to pick up when a new person enters the room and recognizes body shapes. In this video recorded by a man's Kinect camera, you can see him going to sleep on the couch as the Kinect camera produces a stick figure that tracks his movements. However, at some random hour in the night, this is what shows up in the video. It seems as though someone materializes out of thin air and approaches the man sleeping on the couch. The figure leans over watching the man sleep, and then slowly and ominously approaches the camera before the video ends. Oddly enough, there doesn't seem to be any other actual person physically in the room besides the man sleeping on the couch. So what exactly was this Kinect picking up? A TikToker named Cass started uploading videos showcasing an Annabelle's Hugs doll she received as a gift. The doll was purchased on Amazon, and right from the start, Cass felt like something about the doll felt alive.
You guys, I didn't buy this fucking monkey. It was a gift, so you could stop asking me why the fuck I would buy the monkey. I didn't buy it. The person who bought it got it off of Amazon. It's an Ashton Drake doll, and maybe possessed as fuck was not in the description, so. You guys, I just noticed something crazy as fuck, and you're all gonna think this is so insane, but I just took out the certificate of authenticity for her, and you're not gonna freaking believe the name on this thing. Are you shitting me?
Perhaps just an unfortunate coincidence that the doll shares the name of the popular horror movie doll, but it is definitely something to acknowledge after seeing this video that Cass recorded of her taking the doll out of the box.
Oh my fucking god, I swear to god, this thing just fucking looked at me. Oh my fucking.
The doll's eyes momentarily turn to look right at Cassidy. What makes this even more disturbing is that the doll's eyes are not supposed to be able to move.
Also, for the people who say, oh, just, her eyes are supposed to move. I have those dolls, when you pick them up, their eyes move. Her eyes aren't moving. They ain't moving, unless she just blinked right there, I don't fucking know.
If you have any creepy videos you want to send me, check the description for my email. ruthless, young murderer that she was. Elizabeth's body was found in a shallow grave. And it was 6-year-old Emma Bustamante who lived across the woods looking for Elizabeth to come play. But at 6 o'clock, Elizabeth hadn't made it home. It was later found out she was allegedly diverted by Emma's half-sister Alyssa, who called Elizabeth on her cell phone and redirected her back to Alyssa's house. But the most disturbing finding in the room was Alyssa's diary. The diary entry truly painted the terrifying picture of her. It said the dress is on the bed in the bedroom if I want to go look at it. I looked into the dark bedroom, and there was no dress on the bed. I was 17 getting ready for prom. Girls have to find a nice dress that they're going to keep. So I contacted the number listed on the listing. I texted Alex, and then I went to ring the doorbell. The door opened, and instead of some young girl around my age opening the door, it was an actual grown man, like 50 years old. The living room was dark and kind of messy. Then the man called out from a room for me to come inside and try the dress on. He left the room and entered the living room empty-handed. This is a part 2 to the recent video I did of the scariest things to happen on horror movie sets. One of the movies on that list was The Conjuring, and coincidentally, the first movie on this list will be Annabelle, a movie that takes place in the same universe as The Conjuring. The first spin-off film was released in 2014 and was directed by John R. Leonetti, who claims to have experienced not one but 2 supernatural occurrences while on set. The first came when he claimed to have seen 3 fingers drawn through dust on set multiple times, which is disturbing because the demonic doll the movie is named after has 3 fingers. The second came when they shot their first scene with the demon actor in all his makeup. They were filming in an old apartment building near Koreatown, Los Angeles, when the demon actor went up the elevator and headed to where the other actors were. But as he was walking down a hallway, a giant glass light fixture fell on an actor's head who was playing a janitor. To make matters even creepier, in the script, that same hallway is where the demon kills the janitor, and the creepy on-set occurrences of the Conjuring universe don't end there. Corin Hardy, who directed The Nun, says that during production, he saw 2 men in a room he was filming in at a castle in Romania. He assumed they were just crew members. After completing the take, he turned to the men, but they were gone. To make things freakier, they would have had to pass him to leave the room. The 1982 movie The Poltergeist is a movie that is rumored to have been cursed. It's believed that this curse started after Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper decided to use real skeletons during a scene where Jobeth Williams' character falls into a swimming pool filled with skeletons, which unbeknownst to the cast, the skeletons were actually real since using real ones would be cheaper than buying fake ones at the time. The majority of the fuel for the alleged curse stems from the deaths of multiple cast members. In total, 4 cast members died during and soon after the filming of the series. Carol Ann Freeling, the young protagonist of the trilogy, was played by Heather O'Rourke, and she was only 6 years old when the first Poltergeist film was released. Sadly, she was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1987, and the following year, she got sick again and was misdiagnosed with simply having the flu. But one day later, she collapsed and suffered a cardiac arrest. She died that day during an operation to correct a bowel obstruction. Dominique Dunn, who played the original older sister Dana Freeling, met an equally tragic and unforeseen fate. In November of 1982, Dominique's ex John Sweeney, who she had recently cut ties with, showed up at her house pleading for her to take him back. When she refused, he grabbed her neck and choked her until she was unconscious, leaving her to die in her driveway. Sweeney was sentenced to a horrendously lenient 6.5 years in prison, but was released after only 3 years and 7 months. Julian Beck played the evil preacher Cain from Poltergeist 2. In 1983, Julian had been diagnosed with stomach cancer, which took his life soon after he finished work on the second installment of the series. The same film was met with further tragedy after Will Sampson, who played Taylor the Native American shaman, died after undergoing a heart-lung transplant, which had a very slim survival rate. Poltergeist remains a movie with one of the highest amount of tragedies to hit its cast members. Heather O'Rourke was believed to have haunted the set of another movie though, the 1990 film Ghost. Not as much a horror movie, just a movie about the afterlife, but some believe there may have been a real supernatural presence on set. The movie involved Paramount Studios' Stage 19, where the sitcom Happy Days was filmed. a sitcom that Heather starred in 12 episodes for. Workers from the stage have experienced inexplicable power outages and have heard laughter late at night, laughter reminiscent of Heather. One night shift security guard who worked stage 19 told about the paranormal activities that go on at the studio. The security guard claimed that almost every night he would hear running and laughing on the catwalk above the set, which is where Heather liked to play when she was on the set for Happy Days. The security guard also told that sometimes workers would see the little girl playing on the stage. When asked what they do when they see her, the security guard replied that they usually just tell her to leave and she runs off. On the set of Ghost was no different, as multiple crew members have claimed to hear the young girl running around in the catwalks above the stage and laughing. The Exorcist is undeniably one of the most well-known horror movies of all time, having become a household name. But lesser known is the fact that it's also notorious for having a supposedly haunted set. One of the eeriest examples is that the set of the McNeil's house caught fire. The Exorcist was faced with multiple production delays, but the first was by far the worst. The set for Regan's family home burned down in 1972 after a bird flew into the circuit box. The only part of the set that survived was the bedroom where the exorcisms would take place, with the chances of that being very slim. This set production of the movie back significantly, and led to shooting taking over a year. After the incident, a real priest was called in to bless the set. During filming, Ellen Burstyn, who played the mother, Chris McNeil, suffered a spinal injury while being hoisted around on a harness. She claims to have been screaming to turn the cameras off and to stop pulling her, which was all dismissed or ignored. She was left on crutches for the rest of the production.
I had a rig around my midriff with a wire coming out the back, and the stuntman was pulling me too hard. I can get hurt. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. I said, I understand, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. And the stuntman was standing there listening to this, and Billy said to him, okay, don't pull her so hard. But as I turned away, I felt them exchange a look. You see me hit and you see me reach for my back. I screamed in horrendous pain. Billy motioned to Owen to tilt the camera down on me.
The moment she fractured her lower spine was actually the footage that's in the movie, and the screams you hear in the movie are not acting, rather actual cries of pain, but the crew assumed she was only acting. But the real curse of the movie would be the deaths linked to the movie. They included Jack McGowran, who played the film director Burke Dennings. Ahead of the film's release, Jack tragically died from complications related to influenza. Vasiliki Maliaros, who played Father Damien Cara's mother, also passed away that same year before The Exorcist was released, reportedly dying of natural causes. Both of their characters in the movies also died. During the production, a number of the cast and crew, including Linda Blair, who played Regan, and Max von Sydow, who played Father Merrin, also lost family members, and the son of Jason Miller, who played Father Karras, had a near-fatal motorcycle accident during filming. The 1968 film Rosemary's Baby follows a failing actor who agrees to give up his wife's womb to Satan so he could have a taste of fame. It was an instant hit, but the satanic overtones of the film have led people to believe the film had been cursed, and a number of the cast and crew had suffered horrible fates because of it. To start, the composer for the soundtrack of the movie, Krzysztof Komeda, died in 1969 after falling off a rocky slope at a party. He had entered a coma for 4 months until passing away. This is very similar to the death of the character Hutch in Rosemary's Baby, but if anybody were to have been hit the hardest by the alleged curse, it would have to be the film's director, Roman Polanski. Initially, he wanted to include his wife Sharon Tate in the film as Rosemary, but was overruled by the producer Robert Evans, who fought to cast Mia Farrow. Sharon was instead cast as an unnamed background character in a single party scene. A year after the film was released, Sharon and some of her friends were staying in a rented house in Los Angeles when Tex Watson and some girls from the Manson family broke in. The Manson family was a gang or cult led by Charles Manson that was active in California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Tex Watson and the girls killed Sharon and all of her friends, inflicting more than 100 piercing wounds total among the 4 victims. Sharon Tate was 8 months pregnant when it happened. The alleged curse of the movie doesn't stop there, though. The Dakota is a famous building in New York, which served as the exterior for the apartments in Rosemary's Baby. But little did a lot of people know that it was the site of John Lennon's murder. The Dakota's Gothic style was a perfect choice for the movie, as it's exactly what you'd expect the home of witches to look like. The producer Robert Evans claimed that the whole time he felt uncomfortable in and near the building while on set. After the film was released, one of the producers, William Castle, was hit with kidney stones, and he claimed that during surgery, he began to hallucinate scenes from the film and even shouted, "Rosemary, for God's sake, drop that knife." He later admitted in his autobiography that he was overall very frightened of Rosemary's Baby.
I was doing some night hog hunting in the woods near my backyard. I was hiding in the tower I had built about a decade ago. In case anyone's wondering, I of course had a night vision scope attachment. I guess I'm what you would consider a hardcore hunter. I don't want to bore you with the unnecessary story prolonging details, so I'll make this short. And I want everyone to know that though I agree this story sounds far-fetched and crazy, it is nothing but the truth. And I in a way actually consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a horrifying story to share. So, while I was sitting in the tower waiting for movement, it finally came. I took aim and found the source. But it wasn't at all a hog, or any kind of animal I was expecting. It was a person, a man wearing all black. Black sweatpants, black shoes, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head. But that wasn't the freakiest part. He was dragging a sack behind him. My heart started racing. I was pretty sure I was witnessing this guy trying to bury a body. I continued to watch him, but then he slowed down, and I swear to God, it looked as if he turned his head up to me. I ducked down under the wooden walls of the tower, shaking in my boots. Yes, I had a gun, but just the idea of using it against a person is horrifying. I lay low, praying to God that he hadn't seen me. It wouldn't make sense if he could, though. It's practically pitch black out here, or at least, that was my logic. Seconds felt like an eternity as I waited for the footsteps in the leaves to move elsewhere, but I didn't hear any footsteps. All I heard was the sound of a foot hitting one of the wooden planks on the ladder of the tower. I felt the entire tower vibrate and shake as there were 2 more steps moving up the ladder. At this point, I was asking myself deep down, am I going to be able to shoot someone? But for some reason, whoever was down there decided not to climb all the way up, as I heard them jump back down to the forest ground and began dragging the sack away. I think I stayed frozen like a statue for at least 10 minutes before even peeking over the ledge again. The coast seemed clear. I had to get home and warn the police immediately. I hopped over the ledge and descended down the ladder. I turned on my pocket flashlight, which in hindsight was a stupid move considering the situation, and ran back in the direction of my house. I was only able to run for about 10 seconds or so when I heard the rapid, manic footsteps crunching the leaves from behind me. I took a look over my shoulder, and there he was, inches away from my face. I spun around and shot him in the shoulder. He stopped and screamed in agony, and I took that moment to finish my dash to my house. Again, in hindsight, I should have held him hostage somehow, but that doesn't even matter now. I called the police, who showed up within 15 minutes with a whole search squad, and I led them all into the woods to the exact location where I shot him. There was a faint yet noticeable blood trail spilled onto the leaves which led past the body bag, which the cops seized, and eventually right to the maniac, who was hiding under a log next to a tree. He was arrested and tried for the murder of Jinkwen Sakanaki, a Japanese corner store owner. I don't know the full story behind it, but I do know I won't forget this one for the rest of my life, and I'll also be telling it for the rest of my life.
Marissa came to the horrible realization that somebody else was in the house with her using John's phone. Were a bunch of texts from her son John. "Can you come pick me up? I think I injured my elbow." She checked where her son's iPhone was located. She saw John's location was at the house. not at this random intersection. She went and called her other son Kevin, who was also still out. Kevin picked up his phone. When asked if Kevin was with John, he said yes, and John said hi mom into the phone. On the night of April 18th, 2021, at around 7:40 p.m., an Australian man named Mitch Cooney was driving down the Hume Highway in Bardia, Australia. He was returning from a racing event and heading home to Gold Coast City, when completely out of nowhere, he saw a childlike figure standing in the middle of the road. The figure was wearing a blue parka, and from the few seconds he was in view, it looked like he was trying to cross the highway. Now, Mitch was driving at nearly 60 miles an hour, or around 96 kilometers per hour. He was also towing a large toy hauler behind his car. Trying to brake or suddenly move out of the way in these conditions would have certainly resulted in a devastating accident, so Mitch had no choice but to keep driving. Fortunately, he managed to avoid the mysterious figure by mere inches. Fearing the safety of a potential child wandering the Hume Highway, his mother, who was also with him at the time, contacted the Australian police almost seconds later. The officers online assured them that they were putting patrols out immediately. However, Mitch couldn't stop thinking about what he saw. Trying to do everything he could, he called the police again at 8:29 p.m. and offered the dashcam footage he'd captured of this figure. But to Mitch's surprise, the officers told him that they swept the area and actually found a young child matching the description he provided, and that he was being returned to his home as they spoke. What a child was doing in the middle of a highway at night, miles from the nearest civilization, was still a big mystery, but at least he was safe now. As Mitch put it on Facebook later that night, "I felt absolutely sick when all this happened. I instantly felt so much better when I was told the kid had been collected." However, just when Mitch thought everything worked out okay, things took a wild turn. After confirming that the kid was safe, Mitch uploaded the video from his dashcam onto the internet, hoping to share the unnerving encounter he had with others. But as the video and his story gained traction, the New South Wales Police Department came forward and announced that they didn't find any child on the highway that night, completely contradicting what they had told Mitch that night. According to the official report, they scoured the surrounding area for nearly 8 hours, searching until 3:45 a.m. before finally calling it off and finding no trace of a child nearby. The department stated that multiple cars attended and commenced a search of the area. However, no child was located and the search concluded. Now, there's no reason to believe that the NSW police would lie on an official report like this. What's more likely is that the person talking to Mitch earlier didn't know the full details and just made things up. Or maybe it was nothing more than a terrible case of miscommunication, where the police searching for the child somehow got twisted into them already having found him. But if the child was never found, what happened to him? The answer to that question, however, could be anything. Maybe its parents noticed their kid missing and took him back home, or he could have been potentially kidnapped by someone who saw a child roaming the highway alone at night and took advantage of the opportunity. Though none of those theories explain how the child got to that spot in the first place. Unfortunately, the case remains an unsolved mystery to this day, and with so little coverage, it's unlikely we'll get answers anytime soon. On May 8th, 2021, TikToker Pissed Pasta, real name Malie Perales, was returning from a night out with her friends and roommates around 2:30 a.m. However, what was supposed to be a fun hangout took a disturbing turn when, while driving down the Packard Drive Northeast Road next to the Rogue River in Belmont, Michigan, one of them spotted a shadowy figure crawling onto the road.
What the f***?
Stop. No,
Stop.
I'm not. No. Hell no.
What the f***, dude?
Bro. They were soaked.
After discussing for a bit, the group decided to circle back and check what it was, and this is what they came across.
There she is.
Bro, what the f***? See? That was it. That was it. She's crying.
It looked like a young woman, possibly in her 20s or 30s, sitting on the road while either waving at the car or banging her own head. She was also drenched from head to toe in 48° Fahrenheit or about 9° Celsius weather. Malie's group circled back one more time to confirm what they saw, and this time the woman had completely collapsed onto the road. By this point, Malie and her friends had realized that this woman was likely in dire need of medical assistance, but there was also a chance that this was a setup for a robbery, so they made the smart choice and called 911 without getting out of their car. The first responders and the police arrived shortly after and took her to a nearby hospital. Malie returned to the spot they found her a few hours later, and it was still wet from the water dripping from her clothes. More importantly, she also found dig marks on the roadside near the river, suggesting that the woman had likely fallen in and swam out onto the road just minutes before Malie's group passed by. After some investigation, the police also found her car parked behind a house near the river. In other words, she most likely fell into the river on the east side and managed to swim all the way across to the other side. Inquiring about her in the Facebook group for this neighborhood also revealed that she had actually interacted with some of the residents earlier that day, though her interactions were unnerving to say the least. Saw this person between Van Dam and Packer Woods around 10:15 p.m. Friday, asked her if she needed help, to which she responded no. Another quote, "There's another report by a guy on Douglas Street in the West Siders uniforms page who had a similar situation with a woman walking into his home this week. She walked right into someone's house yelling, 'Hello, hello, hello,' then just left. She was wandering the backyard too." Though who she was and how she ended up there is still a mystery. Over the next few days, she recovered enough to tell investigators that she was from Kalamazoo, a town that's over 60 miles away from where she was found. But she didn't have any memory of ever driving to Belmont, which sounds strange at first, but actually has a surprisingly plausible explanation. You see, this woman was a 28-year-old Chinese student named May, who went missing from Kalamazoo on May 6th, 2 days before she was discovered in Belmont. Before going missing, she also told her friends that she felt like she had a stalker. Upon hearing this, one of the first theories that comes to mind is that maybe she was kidnapped and then thrown into the river by this stalker. But it's important to note that according to the few witnesses in the police investigation, she drove to Belmont on her own. It's unclear whether this stalker was even real or not. However, the stress of feeling like she was constantly being watched likely messed with her mental state and triggered a dissociative fugue state, which, for those who don't know, is a mental condition where the person forgets who they are and often starts doing things they otherwise wouldn't do. Some even go as far as moving to other cities and building new lives before they snap out of the state and come to their senses. What makes this already unsettling condition even worse is that the patient usually doesn't remember what they did during that fugue state either, and that's what likely happened to May. She got stressed, went into a fugue state, wandered around in her car for a couple of days, and eventually ended up in the river. Fortunately, she was able to come to her senses and swim to the shore before losing her life. On the 12th of October 2016, a family in Sheffield, England, went to the Drawbridge pub for a night out, and after an evening of fun and laughter, they decided to head back home at around midnight. The roads in that area are usually deserted at that hour, so they were already on guard for any robbers or other criminals they might run into on their way back. However, nothing in the world could have prepared them for what they came across just 5 minutes later. Seconds after they rounded the corner to the Grange Mill Lane Road, a man dressed in a clown costume jumped out from the shadows and blocked the road, forcing the driver to stop. He then started waving at the car, and as soon as it came to a full stop, he started running towards it while still blocking the path forward. When the driver tried to reverse his car and go the other way, the clown started sprinting at full speed. Typically, something like this could be dismissed as just some troll or a YouTuber making a scaring people at night as a clown video, especially given that this was 2016. However, due to an incident that happened just 3 days earlier, the driver of this car had no choice but to assume the worst. You see, on October 9th, at around 8:45 p.m., a man named Simon Chinnery was attacked by a knife-wielding clown in public. Fortunately, the attacker was apprehended before he could do any lethal damage to Simon. Sadly, Simon still suffered multiple slashes to his right hand, leaving it permanently disfigured to the point of being classified as a disability. What's worse than the attack itself was that it went viral and started a craze of thousands of others trying to imitate the attacker. In some parts of the country, the police departments were receiving as many as 23 reports of people threatening others dressed as clowns per day. And while many of these imitators were nothing more than trolls who had no real intentions of harming others, there were those who took things too far, with some trying to force their way into people's cars and chasing women and children with knives. So for this driver to see a man in a clown costume blocking their car while all this was going on had to be deeply unnerving for him. Their fear became worse when they tried to flee the clown, because it started chasing them like a madman. With no other option, The driver was forced to press the pedal to the metal and hope for the best, with the clown jumping out of the way at the last second. This entire situation could have just as easily ended with the clown losing his life if he had even been a fraction of a second slower to jump away. On the other hand, who knows what the attacker might have done if the driver hadn't sped off. On June 2nd, 2018, one of the officers for Fulshire Police Department in Texas was driving back to the station after his shift, when suddenly he saw the car in front of him swerve onto the next lane to avoid hitting something. But this wasn't a tree branch or an animal. Instead, it was something that looked like the aftermath of either a horrific crime or an accident. A young woman in a blue shirt was lying down horizontally across the road and was completely still, suggesting that she was either unconscious or dead. Maybe someone decided to dump the body in the middle of the road after committing the crime. Fortunately, when the officer walked up to her, she not only responded to him, but even stood up on her own. As it turned out, she had driven her car into the ditch next to the road just minutes earlier. Later tests also discovered an extremely high blood alcohol concentration in her system. Put simply, she was driving under the influence and ended up crashing into the side. The concussion from the accident, combined with her prior intoxication, made her behave extremely irrationally, which is why she walked up to the road and lay down without a care in the world. It's nothing short of a miracle that the car in front of the officer was able to spot and avoid her in time, or she would have ended up as nothing more than a cautionary tale about driving under the influence. On the night of February 26, 1946, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend Mary Jean were returning to their homes in Texarkana, Texas after watching a movie together. But before they reached the city limits, Jimmy stopped the car on the side of the road to extend their date for a short while. What neither of them knew, however, was that this little detour would nearly cost them their lives. About 10 minutes after they had stopped, a man came out of the nearby woods and approached the car. He was wearing a white pillowcase over his head with 2 small holes for eyes. The rest of his face was completely hidden from view. He told Jimmy to get out of the car, but Jimmy initially believed that this was a prank of sorts and didn't pay much attention to it. The masked man then pulled out his firearm and pointed it towards the couple, stating, "I don't want to kill you, fella, just do what I say." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jimmy got out of the car as the masked man instructed. As soon as he did, the man swung his weapon at Jimmy's head, knocking him unconscious. Mary tried to run away into the woods, but the man caught up and did the same to her. Thankfully, before he could go further, he got spooked by a set of approaching headlights on the nearby road and ran away. Mary immediately ran to the nearest house and asked them to call the police. Jimmy also regained consciousness and hailed down a passing car to ask for help. However, by the time the police arrived on the scene to investigate, the man had vanished without a trace. Jimmy and Marie were taken to the hospital where it was discovered that the strike had fractured Jimmy's skull in multiple places. Fortunately, he was able to recover without any lasting injuries and describe what he remembered from that night. Both he and Mary gave the same statements about the overall build of the masked man, that he was around 6 feet tall and fairly slender. But for some reason, the two couldn't agree on his ethnicity. Jimmy insisted that he was a Caucasian, while Mary stayed adamant that he was of African origin. This contradiction, along with the seemingly unprovoked nature of the incident, led investigators to incorrectly believe the couple knew the man and were simply trying to protect him. What they didn't realize was that while Jimmy and Mary survived to give a description, the next couple wouldn't be as fortunate. About a month later, on March 24th, a man was driving down a secluded road on the outskirts of Texarkana when he noticed a car parked on the road ahead. From a distance, it looked like a young man was sleeping in that car, slumped over on the steering wheel. However, as the driver got closer, he suspected that something wasn't right, so he pulled over to the side and walked up to the other car to try to wake him up, only to come to a scene far more horrific than he could have ever imagined. Put simply, the young man had already passed away long before the driver stumbled across him. He also noticed a woman in the back seat who had sadly suffered the same fate. Police were called to the scene, and they quickly identified the two as Richard Griffin and his girlfriend Polly Ann Moore. Both were killed with shots to the head. Unfortunately, the only evidence investigators were able to gather from the crime scene was a single .32 caliber cartridge, and while they didn't know it at this point, this incident was also the doing of the same man Jimmy and Mary had encountered a month earlier. The police finally made this connection on April 14th when another couple encountered the same man while on an isolated road, and they were killed with a firearm of the same caliber. News of these 3 incidents quickly spread through Texarkana, putting all the residents on high alert. Fearing for their safety, most residents stopped driving at night entirely, while the remaining made sure to avoid empty roads at all costs. The masked man was also given the name of the Texarkana Phantom due to his inability to appear and disappear without a trace. And true to his name, he was becoming harder to track with each passing day, even after the FBI got involved. After 2 more months of fruitless searching, one of the investigators noticed that the vehicles were stolen shortly before each incident and were found abandoned not long after. Following this lead led to a man named Ewell Swinney, a car thief with 2 felonies to his name already. His height and build matched what Jimmy and Mary had described earlier. More importantly, when an officer tried to arrest him for the 3rd time for car theft, he claimed that he knew that the officer wanted him for more than stealing cars. Unfortunately, investigators weren't able to find any evidence linking Ewell directly to the 3 haunting road encounters. Luckily, his prior felonies allowed prosecutors to give the harshest punishment for his 3rd theft-related offense and sentenced him to life in prison. That being said, Ewell continued to deny any involvement in the 3 incidents until his end in 1994, leaving the Texarkana Phantom encounters a somewhat unresolved mystery to this day. On the 8th of January 2024, a truck driver was driving on a remote stretch of highway in Western Australia when at around 11 p.m., this driver had the most unnerving road encounter of his life. Nearly 62 miles south of Perth, he saw what looked like 2 people dragging something across the highway. They showed up almost out of nowhere, forcing the truck driver to swerve around them at a dangerous speed. But by the time he stopped the truck and looked back, they had already vanished into the surrounding darkness. Which begs the question, what were they dragging and why? Unfortunately, the answer to both these questions is extremely ambiguous. For starters, it's extremely difficult to identify what exactly they were dragging. Going frame by frame, we can see what looks like the legs of another person wearing shorts and black shoes. So maybe the 2 people were trying to hide the primary evidence of their horrific crime. But in motion, it looked more like an animal or something in between. It could even be a life-sized plush, though that doesn't explain its very human-like proportions. Regardless of what it was, however, an equally important question is why 2 people would drag something across a highway. On September 16, 2018, an Uber driver from New York shared the terrifying encounter he had with an angry man on Long Island. He was about to complete a ride when, out of nowhere, another car drove past him at a very high speed while barely avoiding a collision. But before the Uber driver could even process what had happened, the other driver slammed on the brakes and parked in the middle of the road, blocking him from moving forward. He then got out of the car, ran over, and started bashing on the windows, telling the Uber driver to get out.
What's going on? What's going on?
I don't know.
What is that?
What's that?
You blew the fucking right leg. Get the fuck out of the car right now.
Just
not
go,
getting
just
out of the
go, 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 go. Just go, just go, go. Go around him. Go.
It's unclear if this was simply unprovoked road rage or an attempt to rob the driver and his passengers. Not wanting to find out the answer, the Uber driver made the correct decision and backed up to find a different route to his destination. However, there was no way for him to predict just how relentless the other driver would be. As soon as the Uber driver changed routes, the other driver got in his car as well and started chasing him no matter where he went. Things went from bad to worse as they approached a red light, which would have given the other driver a chance to catch up and do something terrible before the police arrived. But in a remarkable stroke of luck, the Uber driver found a cop already waiting on the other side of the intersection. They were able to explain the situation to the officers, resulting in the other driver getting arrested for driving while intoxicated.
Stopped the car, got out of the car, was trying to fight with me. So I backed up and turned around, and then he was pursuing me. And these girls
Call 911.
These girls called 911, and the officer pursued him.
Put simply, the other driver wasn't thinking clearly and could have been armed. If the Uber driver had panicked when he first approached, all 3 of them might have lost their lives. When my cousin Cody and I were in our early 20s, we went on a handful of camping trips around Colorado. This happened, I believe, when I was 22 and he was 23, and it happened in Arapahoe Forest. It was my first time camping there, not Cody's though. It was in the middle of the week. Our jobs allowed us to have off days in the middle of the week, and we'd often go on our campouts then to avoid traffic and crowds. I always let Cody take charge on these trips. He's the Eagle Scout, not me. We parked by a picnic area, and we set foot into the woods from there. After about 15 minutes of hiking deeper into the woods, we found a good spot to set up camp. A good spot meaning a big enough clearing to fit 2 tents, the portable stove, and a campfire. The first thing we did was unpack our stuff and set up our tents. Cody has always been a lot quicker than me in pitching a tent. He does it in only a few minutes. It always takes me over 20 minutes. Or rather, it always took me over 20 minutes, as I haven't been camping out in the wilderness since this. The next thing we did was create a ring of stones for a fire, and then gathered some sticks and wood. He did bring some fire starter and a lighter, so I guess we kind of cheated, but oh well. It was at the point in the day when the sun was going down. We had a fire going, and now Cody was grilling up some steak and burgers. One thing about Cody is he always went all out with the food on these trips, and he's a really good cook, so I always trusted him with feeding us. Of course, we had our bear spray in case the smell of the food would attract a black bear, which Cody always said was very unlikely. He always says the real thing you gotta worry about in the middle of the woods is other people. As we ate our steak and burgers, we cracked open some beers and had some classic rock playing on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you don't understand how good of a vibe moments like this are. In the wilderness with a friend or family member and some beers, reminiscing about good times and vibing to music. As it got dark, we started playing card games on this little folding platform table we brought specifically for cards. After playing more traditional card games, we started playing Uno, and this was when we heard something out in the woods. I paused the song on my phone so that the speaker would go silent. It was clear now. We heard a person humming and footsteps from beyond the trees in the pitch blackness of the forest. Cody urged me to find the flashlight. I tried, but by the time I found it, the sounds had faded away. I asked Cody if that was something to be concerned about, and he said it definitely was unusual for someone else to be this deep in the woods, let alone creepily walking by a campsite with an active campfire humming loudly. I was a bit shaken, and I saw Cody was too. We went back to playing cards with the music much lower now. When we least expected it, a big stick landing in the middle of our campsite made us both jump out of our skin. It didn't fall from a tree. This thing was thrown at us by someone. Cody started yelling something along the lines of, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life and f*** off." And then, footsteps could be heard once again in the distance. They were walking away from us. I said we should pack up camp and move somewhere else. He said absolutely not in the dark. We both had bear spray, and he advised to just keep it next to me in my tent when we go to sleep. It was the closest thing to ranged self-defense weapons we had. We kept hearing sounds like tree branches cracking in the distance, sounds that you would never expect an animal to be making. Someone was out there, maybe multiple people, that much was clear. We had to go to sleep eventually, so we agreed that maybe we should take turns staying up to keep watch to make sure that no one comes to our campsite and steals anything, or worse. Cody agreed to take first watch. He said he'd stay up and read his book. So I crawled into my tent and then my sleeping bag and went to sleep. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. You're in a cold, outdoor environment in an uncomfortable sleeping bag. Any number of things could wake you up. I didn't yet know what woke me up. I was still in a fog. My brain didn't feel fully woken up yet. I looked up and saw a head peering into my tent. It looked like Cody. I rubbed my eyes, but really it was the darkness that was preventing me from seeing anything of his face. I said, "Cody?" thinking he was waking me up to take my turn of keeping watch. I said groggily, "Is it my turn?" I stared at the head peering at me in my sleeping bag, slowly growing more awake every second. Then I heard the zipper to the tent quickly zip up, and his head disappeared. I laid back down in my sleeping bag, but only for a second. I suddenly had some weird moment of clarity, where I shot to an upright position and listened as the footsteps walked away. "Cody," I said. He didn't answer. I unzipped my tent to peek out to the campsite. The fire was dead. Cody wasn't out there. I went over to Cody's tent, which was zipped up. I unzipped it and looked inside to see Cody fast asleep in his sleeping bag. I got chills, goosebumps, whatever you want to call it. I almost shit myself at the realization. I started shaking him awake, and when he finally awoke, I told him someone's here, at the campsite. It took him a minute to come back to reality just like I did. But when he did, he grabbed his bear spray. He said he must have dozed off while reading. He said I should sleep in the tent with him tonight, but to do that, I'd need my sleeping bag. He came outside of the tent with me and stood watch as I ran to my tent to grab my sleeping bag. In my tent, grabbing my sleeping bag, I heard that goddamn humming again from outside. I grabbed it and Cody whispered at me to hurry up. I said, "You hear that too?" He said yes. We both got back in his tent and zipped it up, with our cans of bear spray by our sides. I tell you, in those moments, I wanted nothing more than for a bear to come and save the day. The hours dragged on as I stayed up while Cody slept. After 3 long, horrible hours, I woke him up and we switched. When Cody woke me up, it was almost dawn. There was light outside. So we packed everything up, and by the time we were done, there was plenty of light to hike back to the car. While we could have driven somewhere else and had another night of camping elsewhere, neither of us were feeling it anymore. This was a haunting experience, and I think we both just wanted to be in the safety of our houses. It's been 6 years since this happened, and he's hit me up a few times since then about camping, but I haven't really had interest since this experience. People are just too scary. Why was someone out there stalking our campsite? And the sight of that person's head in the dark, just looking into my tent, it was straight up from a nightmare. I may never go camping again, honestly. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me in life that you should not be scared of ghosts, fear the living, because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month, and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was just going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car to the cabin. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal and nothing out of the ordinary happened. I spent my days playing with Midnight in the snow and snowboarding, and the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. I had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs, PlayStations as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. The bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. The 3rd day came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog, playing games, and watching DVDs. That day it was a pretty heavy snowfall, so instead of hitting the slopes, I stayed in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had just been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The footprints led away from my cabin and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees. I disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around, and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in the bed and stayed silent. I was honestly freaked out, and I could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit, well fine, I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright, maybe there's some forest animals out there that he wants to chase down. But fuck this, I didn't want to chase anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in my bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time, I considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. As soon as I went outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Was it all in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It looked really tall, like 8 or 9 feet, and it was really fucking skinny. It was squatted on one branch, and its freakishly long, white arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it, while its mouth was wide open with no expression. What the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing, and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard some light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open that door, but at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head, telling me to stay in bed and don't do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was. I passed out eventually and woke up in the morning. It didn't take me long to pack everything and get the hell out of there. I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a long time ago, so it had to be like an iPhone 7 or something. Phones still had the home buttons back then. I found this listing for a phone. It was some generic looking post. iPhone whatever for sale, new, around $300. It was a really good deal for the time, that I remember. He told me all the small details I needed to know, that it was factory unlocked, never opened, and stuff like that. He sent me a video of the box too, still sealed. The guy, whose name was Melvin, seemed nice and easy to talk to over text. I got his number and we discussed a pickup point. His location on the Facebook ad was much closer to me, but over text he was telling me he was only there this morning, and now he went about an hour north. I wasn't happy about this, but this was a really good deal and I didn't want to pass it up. I started asking a bunch of friends if they'd want to come on an adventure with me. Really just a way of making the chore of accompanying me for an hour drive seem fun. My friend Martina actually agreed to come with, on the promise that I buy her food for coming. So this Melvin guy sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police precinct parking lots to avoid scams. I obviously had no problem with this. In fact, it made me feel a little more confident in this whole thing. I picked up Martina on the way around 8:30 at night, and off we went. She being in the car and having someone to talk to made the trip more fun. It was also a Friday night, so afterwards we could go out and do whatever we wanted. When I got off the highway, we were about 10 minutes away, and we found ourselves in a very secluded, quiet area. It seemed like a lot of different wooded areas. Occasional buildings and houses, and then more woods. We got to the police precinct, and there was no one visibly parked in the parking lot, besides empty police cars, of course. We drove around the whole building a couple times and didn't see this Melvin guy, who said he was in a black Altima, so I decided to call him. He picked up and said he's having issues with his car on the side of the road, and asked if I could come to him. He sent his location and I checked it. He was on the side of some random road with nothing on either side, and by nothing I mean woods. That's the kind of area we were in. He asked me to come help him jump his car. He had jumper cables. I said, yeah, I guess I could do that. I mean, we drove the hour to get there. I didn't want to just drive another hour for nothing. Martina was shaking her head the whole time I was on the phone. The guy said, see you soon, and hung up. Martina then basically screamed, no way, this is sketchy, we're going home. I told her we'll just drive past the location he sent and see what's up. I did agree with her though. This seemed incredibly sketchy. I just was very upset if we drove 2 hours for nothing. We did drive to the location, and when we got to it, we saw the reflection of a car's front lights coming up on the pitch black road we found ourselves on. As we got closer, I slowed down, and it was in fact a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. Mind you, it was very dark, but I feel like we would have seen someone's head on the inside or something. Martina said to just keep driving, and I said I know. It was about the sketchiest thing I'd ever seen. A pitch black road between two patches of woods, no streetlights, no other cars in sight. A pretty convenient place to break down and have someone who's coming with a wad of cash to buy something from you come and meet. I drove right past it. Immediately, Melvin starts calling me over and over. I ignored every single call. Then he texted me saying, I saw you just pass me, why didn't you stop? Turn around. Ignored. Martina is a very positive person, so she laughed about this whole situation, and then said, okay, you owe me food. So I looked up the nearest diner, and we stopped there for some food. It was a quiet, small diner. We were just about the only people in there, even on a Friday night. The waitress just took our coffee order, when a lone guy with his hood up steps into the diner and sits in one of the bar stools. He was wearing a navy blue, dirty-looking hoodie. He glanced over to Martina and I, then looked straight ahead, talking to the lady working behind the counter, apparently ordering a coffee. The man kept glancing at our table like every minute, so I whispered to Martina, don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be the Melvin guy. The waitress came with our coffees. I asked if we were ready to order. I said a few minutes, please. When the lady behind the counter handed that man his coffee, he said loud and clear, thank you, darling. It was that guy from the phone's voice, Melvin or whatever his real name was. I told Martina that's him. We need to pay the check and leave. I waved the server over and whispered to her if we can just get the check. She asked if something's wrong, and I noticed the guy look over as I said this. I said yes, we just needed some coffee for the road. So she got the check, I paid, we downed our coffees, and left the building. We got in my car, and Martina said, oh my god, he's getting up. I looked into the diner and saw that guy leaving towards the door. As quickly as possible, I drove us out of that parking lot and sped down the road. And yes, we noticed a black car in the parking lot that could have been the one that we saw on the side of the road. I was driving too fast for him to have caught up. We got back on the highway and I was flying for a while, until I got a low tire pressure light come on. I knew instantly he slashed my tire. The PSI was going down fast, so to avoid damage, I pulled to the side of the highway and parked it. I went out to confirm that my tire was slashed. I had to replace the tire with the spare, which took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a disaster, And if you're wondering, yes, I still got Martina dinner that night. Now Martina and I look at it as a crazy story that we can look back on and tell people. It's absolutely horrifying, though, how close we were to walking into a trap. I was seeing this girl for a few weeks. We'd been on 2 dates. Her name was Phoebe. We matched on a dating app and eventually met a few days later. She was 4 years older than me. Our first date was drinks, and our second date we went out with my friends on a weekend. My friends had neutral opinions about her. They thought she was, quote, nice and kinda quiet. They'd later reveal their actual thoughts on her, but I'll get to that later. Phoebe invited me to an upcoming high school reunion party. She told me she didn't want to go alone, and honestly, after she came to hang out with my friends and I felt like I owed her. This reunion party was falling on a random Saturday in the fall. It wasn't organized by her school, though. She told me that it was organized by this rich guy from her class, and it was being hosted at his house. I haven't had my high school reunion yet, but as far as I know, these things are usually held at bars or catering halls. We got to this guy's house, and it was admittedly a fancy-looking house. It had a gated driveway, but no fancy cars parked anywhere in sight. My thought was maybe the owner parked his car in the garage during the party. The second we stepped into the house, I felt like everyone was staring at us. More specifically, me. A few people came up to Phoebe and hugged her hello, then shifted their attention to me. I felt almost like I was being interrogated with some of the questions these people were asking me. Like my whole life story, what I do for a living, who I live with. Finally, Phoebe pulled us away, only to go talk to more people who I also felt like were asking really personal and weird questions. There was also something about all the people in here. They seemed to be older looking than 28, which was the age Phoebe told me she was. Some of these people looked well into their 30s. I made a comment on that to Phoebe, and she said, yeah, some of these people aren't aging too well. I asked if she remembers all these people, and she said yes. I then asked who the party host was. I was curious to meet the owner of this big house. She said she hadn't seen him yet. Throughout the entirety of me being there, I felt like everybody was shooting me daggers. They wouldn't look away either. I whispered that to Phoebe, and she said back it's probably because they're wondering who I am. At the time, that was the only logical explanation I could think of, too. It's hard to explain the growing awkwardness at this party, but I can assure you, this was not what a normal high school reunion would be like. There was no music, and everyone was dressed weirdly, not like normal 28-year-olds. But that's the other thing. None of these people looked like they were in their 20s. I was getting uncomfortable with some of the stares I was getting in the room we were in, so I told Phoebe I'm going to run to the bathroom. Realistically, I just wanted to get out of that room and explore the house a little bit. I didn't have a drink in my hand or anything to make me feel at ease. I was just walking around this giant house empty-handed, and anyone I passed stared at me. To say I felt out of place would be the understatement of the century. I found the bathroom. I stepped inside even though I didn't have to go. I locked myself inside just to sit and regather myself, take a break from the awkwardness outside. I texted all my friends about how weird this reunion was, and wondering how I could convince Phoebe to leave early. We'd already been there about 30 to 45 minutes, and this unnamed mystery party host was nowhere to be seen. Phoebe texted me, "Where are you?" I replied, "In the bathroom, give me a minute." Then I followed that up with, "This party's really weird, I'm down to leave soon." She said, "Why?" I said, "Everyone's being weird." Then someone knocked on the bathroom door, so I couldn't sit in there anymore. I washed my hands quick and left the bathroom, and the guy waiting outside, who looked like one of the younger ones here, said in a very low voice to me, "You should leave. That girl isn't who she says she is." I froze for a second, then said, "Phoebe?" He said, "Whatever she told you her name is." He then asked what she told me this party was. I said that she told me it was a high school reunion. The guy then smirked and said, "Do these people look like they're going to a high school reunion?" He left it off with, and I quote, "Trust me, leave sooner than later." And then he walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I almost knocked on the door to get him to come out and further explain, but I thought for a second. I was already suspicious and uncomfortable in this house. That guy just confirmed something weird is going on here. I walked straight to the front door without drawing attention to myself. I still felt people staring at me as I walked to the door. I walked straight from my car in the street and drove home. Phoebe texted me asking where I went. I didn't answer. When I got home, I looked up her number on White Pages. That number was not associated with the name Phoebe. The name that came up was Claire Foster. The address that I picked her up at both times is also different than the address that came up on White Pages, which made me realize I never saw her leave the house. She was already waiting on the sidewalk both times. I replied to her text, "I had to leave, I'm sorry," and blocked her number. My friends all made jokes, and they told me she thought she was weird and off from the start, but they didn't want to tell me that and make me feel bad. My one friend joked that it sounded like I was in the movie Get Out. My friends and family all have had little theories as to what was going on. Some people would even think I exaggerated the whole thing until I told them about the fake name the girl gave me, and the guy telling me to leave sooner than later. This happened when I was a young child, maybe like 8 years old. My parents had me late. My two older siblings are both at least 10 years older than me. I was woken up in the middle of the night to a commotion from downstairs one night. It was my parents. I cracked my door open and heard my parents freaking out about something. I wasn't sure what it was. I went to the stairway and stood at the top, calling down, "Mom? Dad?" My mom came to the bottom of the stairs and said to me, "Go back to bed." I listened without asking any questions. I could tell they were stressed about something though. I was trying to go back to sleep when I heard the front door downstairs slam shut, and then it was dead silent. I presumed they left the house, but I wasn't sure why. Either way, I listened to my mom and went back to sleep. I woke up again to sounds downstairs once more. It was the sound of the front door closing, and then footsteps, but no talking. Naturally, I assumed they were back home and just being quiet so that they wouldn't wake me up. I heard occasional steps and thuds from downstairs. I heard drawers and cabinets being opened and closed, and I thought for sure I heard the fridge opening too. I thought it was my older brother Chris, who's 10 years older than me, and at the time he was already driving, so he was going out and coming home late. So him getting home at like 2 a.m. and rummaging the fridge wasn't abnormal at all. These are all things I was telling myself, logical explanations as to what I was hearing. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, getting louder and closer until they reached the top, and then made their way first thing to my door. My door quietly and slowly opened. I didn't sit up or move. I just had my eyes open facing the door as I was still laying down. There weren't any lights on outside of my room. Whoever was walking around was doing so in the dark, so all I saw was this black mass at my doorway, resembling the shape of someone's head. I said every name starting from Chris to Mom to Dad. Then I just said, "Who's there?" They didn't reply. They just closed the door, and I was left there confused but mildly creeped out. I heard footsteps going downstairs. I was convinced it was my dad now, just coming to check on me after getting home, though I wasn't sure why he was ignoring me. I didn't hear anything from downstairs for a while now. I allowed curiosity to get the better of me, and I went downstairs in the dark. I kept all the lights off as I was approaching the kitchen, and I froze at the doorway, noticing a tall figure standing right in the middle of the kitchen. I said, "Dad?" assuming it was him just based off the size of this person. A deep voice said, "Go back upstairs." I ran back up the stairs to my room and closed the door and jumped under the covers. All I was thinking was, why did my dad's voice sound like that? The reality of a stranger being in the house didn't dawn on my innocent little mind. Not until a little later, when I heard the front door opening and a commotion from downstairs again. The voices of my parents. I went to the top of the stairway again, and they were shocked to see I was still awake. I asked what happened. They told me that Chris had a little accident, but that he was going to be fine. I found out months later that he had gotten into a car accident driving in a condition that he shouldn't have been driving in. My parents got a call from the hospital, and so they rushed to see him first thing, leaving me to sleep. I asked my dad if he had come in my room before, and that was when I learned that they had been gone for hours. My mom started freaking out, yelling at my dad because he had neglected to lock the door when they rushed out of the house. Me telling my parents about the person at my bedroom door and in the kitchen caused my dad to search the house with his gun, and my mom to call the police. The last thing I really remember was being asked by a police officer to give my story. My parents tell me that they felt like morons having to explain to the cops that they left me alone and left the door unlocked. I don't think anything of value was stolen. Even though whoever broke into the house clearly didn't have intentions of harming me, having a complete stranger in your house is already a terrifying ordeal. Now imagine going through that at 8 years old. I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, who was in her 40s, worked overnights, and she needed a caretaker with medical experience to watch her overnight. When I say once worked for them, I mean I literally worked once, just this night, and you're about to hear why I never went back. The 65-year-old woman's name was Martha. Her daughter's name, who contacted me, was named Colleen. It's possible Colleen didn't have any other family to watch her and didn't want to or couldn't afford to put Martha in a nursing home. Or it was possible that she felt more comfortable hiring somebody with some form of experience to watch over her. At the time, I was already a direct care worker for 2 other women who suffered some forms of developmental disabilities, so I had experience. But nothing prepared me for that night. Colleen left for work. Earlier that day, I worked my first job, so I was really pushing my body to exhaustion, trying to make as much money as possible. Colleen had introduced Martha and I. Martha had given me a smile before Colleen brought her upstairs to her bedroom for the night. It was around 9 p.m. Colleen told me that Martha would sometimes walk around the house at night acting confused, and I'd need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. She specifically addressed this not to be a form of sleepwalking when I asked. She said it's one of the symptoms of her mother's dementia. I told her to rest assured that I'd know how to handle it. I spent my time initially in the living room catching up on my show. These jobs aren't super glamorous, and for the most part, it is a lot of sitting around. I heard footsteps from upstairs. I went to the stairway and looked up the stairs, then called Martha's name asking if she needed anything. She didn't answer. I heard her footsteps go back to her room, and then the door closed. Maybe she went to the bathroom. I went back to the living room and watched some more TV. It was maybe an hour later that I got up to grab my sandwich that I brought from the fridge. As I left the kitchen with a plate and my sandwich to go back to the couch, I nearly had a heart attack and dropped the plate when I saw Martha standing at the doorway. Glass shattered everywhere. I apologized to her and asked if she was okay. She started yelling at me, "Who are you?" I reminded her who I am. I'm her direct care worker here to make sure she's okay. Everything she said at this point was in a loud scream. "Why are you here? I don't know you," things of that nature. I reminded her that we had just met, and that her mother Colleen hired me to watch her and the house. This seemed to work for long enough for me to get her to come back upstairs with me and to her room. I brought her up a glass of water and some melatonin and clonazepam. I made sure she took both before going back downstairs. After a few hours, I was absolutely exhausted. I had to get a couple hours of shut-eye. There was a spare bedroom upstairs with a twin-size bed where Colleen said I could rest if needed. I felt like at this point Martha was asleep for the night from the melatonin. I fell asleep within minutes, but I was asleep for only maybe an hour. I woke up to a sound from downstairs. It was this repeated slamming. Every 1 to 2 seconds, something from downstairs was being slammed. I jumped out of the bed. I had left the bedroom door open so that I'd hear anything if Martha got up. Case in point right here. When I got to the stairs, I realized the slamming was coming from the kitchen. I walked down the stairs in as quick of a speed as I could while still remaining quiet. Getting to the bottom, I peered around the opening to the kitchen, and what I saw was like a scene from a scary movie I'd seen before. I saw Martha in the darkness, standing in front of the oven, repeatedly opening it and slamming it shut. It was horrifying. When I say I saw Martha, I really only saw her silhouette. It was that dark in the kitchen. I said "Martha" really loudly, and she stopped, turned to her left at me, shut the oven door one final time, and started walking towards me, towards the stairs. I said in a now softer, kind of scared-sounding voice, "Are you okay?" She got close enough to me where I could now see her facial features, and she looked at me with this blank expression, then walked right past me and started walking up the stairs. I followed her upstairs, but as soon as she got to her room, she slammed her door shut. I knocked on the door saying, "Martha, are you alright?" She didn't respond. I quietly opened the door just to peek inside, and I saw Martha at the side of her bed, just standing facing the wall. I've seen a lot, but this was some pretty unsettling behavior that I feel like is the exact kind of stuff you'd see in some scary movies, like I mentioned before. I walked over to her and gently eased her into the bed. When she was laying down, I covered her, and for what I was hoping would be the final time, I said goodnight, Martha, and shut her door. I went across the upstairs to the spare room and went back to bed. I purposely tried not to fall asleep for at least half an hour just in case she'd wake up again, but I don't even know if I made it that long. All I know is I fell asleep pretty freaking quickly. I woke up once again, however much later. The room was still pitch black, and the 1-hour alarm I set had not yet gone off. I looked around the room, wondering what woke me up. I didn't see what it was until I heard a sound from inside the closet. I then noticed the cracked open closet door and the black shadow of a head peeking out of the closet. Again, I almost had a heart attack. I said, "Martha." She didn't answer. I kept saying Martha a bunch of times until she pushed the door open and I saw her approaching the bed slowly. She started saying what she was saying hours ago again. "Who are you? I don't know you." As she got closer, I tried calming her down, reminding her who I am. I reached for the lamp next to the bed and fumbled with it until it turned on. Martha was holding a huge kitchen knife in her hand. At this moment, everything changed. Martha was now a threat to my life, and I had to worry about myself, not her. I screamed at this point. Martha, put the knife down. I guess my scream stressed her out because she got closer and started screaming back at me, still repeating, "I don't know you." I wasn't going to attempt to calm down a knife-wielding dementia patient. That was not in any job description. I mapped out a way to run around her in the bedroom, and I went for it. I jumped off the bed on the side further from her, and she screamed again, "Who are you?" She swung the knife at the air as I ran past her. It was a slow and weak swipe from what I saw, but nonetheless showed that she had intentions of actually using it. I got downstairs and grabbed my shoes and went outside. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen as she requested I do if there's an issue. I was courteous in doing this because getting law enforcement involved is never doing anyone any favors. Colleen was yelling into the phone at me not to leave her, and honestly I yelled back that she attempted to kill me and that I didn't call the police. She had to leave work, of course. I stayed outside of the house, making sure Martha didn't go anywhere until Colleen returned. When Colleen went inside, Martha was back in her bed asleep. Colleen went as far as accusing me of exaggerating the whole thing until she found the knife next to Martha's bed. To not give her any more fuel to blame me for any of this, I left out the fact that I ever went to sleep. But that doesn't mean that I felt in any way I did anything wrong. Colleen even offered me that room to sleep. I never worked in that house again. Martha was a scarier patient than I'd ever dealt with in any of my jobs in my 9 years of being a direct care aide. When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. I still work with the company, but I've been able to move back to my hometown and work at the local office here. But at the time, I needed somewhere to live that wouldn't be bank-breaking. I made a posting on basically all the websites for a roommate: Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, and even on my neighborhood subreddit. I had a guy named Rob reach out to me on Facebook, stating he has a room available in his place. I looked at his pictures to see if he looked like a somewhat normal guy, and he did. I was open to the idea of having a male roommate, as long as they seemed normal, even though my parents were very against it. Rob and I FaceTimed, during which he gave me a virtual tour of the place. Apparently he owned the place outright. It was a modest house in the middle of town, only a 10-minute drive from where my office would be. He also seemed pretty nice. I didn't get any bad vibes at all. His price was fair, and his rules were pretty fair too. He said it was available to move in right away, which was perfect. So it was settled. A week later, I had all my things packed and drove down. I met Rob right out front of the house, where he greeted me and handed me a key. The first thing I noticed about him was he was really short. He was eye level with me. He helped me bring some of the bigger and heavier bags inside. He showed me my room, which was furnished already. He said one of his friends had been living there and recently moved out. I replaced all the pillows and bed sheets with my own, of course. The rest of that day was me settling in. Rob, I could see, was trying to get to know me and presumably make me feel at home. I didn't get any overly friendly vibes yet. The next day was Sunday. Rob offered to drive me around town to show me around. I wasn't eager to, but I said sure, just to get off on a good start with him. He drove us around town, showing me where the good shopping centers are, good restaurants, and stuff like that. But then he offered to get us lunch. I really wasn't hungry, and he was suggesting a sit-down lunch, almost like a date. I didn't want him to get any kind of wrong idea, I just needed a room. I said I'm not hungry, and then he right away suggested we go grab drinks somewhere instead. I politely shot it down too, saying I don't drink on work nights. He was being a bit pushy, saying, come on, just a couple drinks. I still maintained my politeness and said another time. He gave up, and he went really quiet all of a sudden, like he was upset. I'll admit, I was slightly uncomfortable, but nothing I couldn't handle yet. That week was my first week at work, and so my attention was focused mostly on adjusting to the work week. It wasn't until a few days into the week that I got home and did my laundry, and noticed my hamper full of clothes seemed moved. Like the clothes weren't how I remembered they were left, and it wasn't until I was loading the washing machine that I noticed a pair of my underwear was missing. I checked my room top to bottom like 5 times. It was gone. I had a disturbing thought. What if Rob... No, I refused to believe that just yet, and there was no chance in hell I would confront him and ask him that. Still, I was now starting to wish there was a lock on the bedroom door. That weekend, I bought a lockable doorknob from Ace Hardware, and while Rob wasn't home, I swapped out the current doorknob with the new one. Now I could leave the place in peace. I figured I'd tell Rob the next time I saw him. He didn't come home that night, though. He must have been working. His schedule seemed pretty random. That night, I awoke to banging on my bedroom door. It was Rob. He was saying my name, and he didn't sound happy. I checked the time, and it was like 1:30 in the morning. I decided I would pretend I'm asleep. I was honestly kind of scared to open the door. I had a feeling it had to do with the doorknob, and I was right. The next morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from Rob, saying, we need to talk, be home after work. I simply responded, is this about the doorknob? And he responded back, yes. I apologized to him and said I was planning on telling him. He replied back, it comes off today. I was getting incredibly nasty and weird vibes from his tone. My next response I thought out a little longer, and basically said how I hope he can sympathize and understand that I'm a girl and I just feel safer being able to have privacy in my room. He responded a little nicer this time, but he still basically said no to my request and that the old doorknob needs to go back on. I was confused, I was upset, but I had to respect his rules. I did also install it without telling him, so I felt like he had a right to be kind of mad. But how did he know I changed it? It's not like I had the old doorknob sitting out in the open. The idea that he tried coming into my room that night kind of scared me. I changed the doorknob back the next day and returned to Ace. This is where things went really downhill though. There was a knock at the door one day when Rob wasn't home. It was a girl around my age. She asked me if I was living here with Rob, and I said yes. She warned me to get out of there immediately, that Rob has multiple restraining orders against him from different girls, and he's known to be a very dangerous, creepy stalker. I was at a loss for words. I asked her how she knew I was here. She said she knew that he was trying to rent his room, and that it's not surprising he opted to have a girl move in. She said she saw me moving in and wanted to wait till he wasn't home to come warn me. I thanked her so much. I truly was terrified now. I had already paid Rob for the entire month. I didn't know what to do. She said she would help me in any way she could. I took her number and she left. I started packing my things and looking for other places I could move to. I found something across town, a studio apartment sublet for a little more money. I contacted the poster of the ad, and she told me I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect. Now I just needed to tell Rob and get my money back. I started packing some of my stuff into my car, and I texted him that I'd have to be moving out tomorrow, as something with my family came up and I needed to go home. He didn't answer. He got back to the house about an hour later and asked me about my text. I came up with my best fake story possible, and he said yeah, he'll give me the money back tomorrow after he goes to the bank. I was super relieved. About an hour later, he knocked on my door, and then said, did by some chance some girl say something to you? I simply said, no, what do you mean? And he said, never mind, it just seems like you're running away out of here for another reason. I insisted that it was purely because of the family reasons. He said okay and left. Sadly, the story didn't end there. I woke up that night and screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw a black figure sitting on the end of the bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand on my mouth and went, "Shh." I said, "Please don't hurt me." And he responded, "Why would I hurt you? I knew someone said something to you. Don't believe what these girls say." I said, "You're scaring me." And this part is still just as insane to me as it was in that moment. He started to caress my leg, and he said, "I don't mean to scare you," right after I said he's scaring me. I got out of the bed and ran for the door, and he screamed at me to stop. I ran outside with my phone in hand and called the police. I hid in the bush until they showed up, and I explained the entire situation to them. They made Rob come outside and give his side of the story. Basically, I told them I just want to get all my stuff out of the room and I'm leaving. So the cops stayed there as I collected the remainder of my stuff and brought it all to my car. I also insisted on Rob Venmoing me the money back while the police were there, and he did so actually. The whole time the police were there, he tried his best to act like some normal dude, I could tell. One of the officers then pulled me to the side to tell me that this guy had been arrested before for other incidents with women, but Rob denied ever coming in my room or touching me or anything, so it was all he said, she said. I left the house and went straight to a hotel for the night. The next day, I moved into the studio apartment. Luckily, the girl who posted it was able to facilitate my quick move-in. I have never and will never live with another man who's not my boyfriend or husband ever again, or just anyone I don't know for that matter. I was home alone one night for a reason I don't remember. All I remember is my entire family was gone. I was 15 or 16 years old. I was a big gamer at the time. I was obsessed with StarCraft, and admittedly, I'd sometimes spend a weekend night or two playing StarCraft or some other PC game. This was right before COVID lockdown started. I was playing StarCraft on my computer in my bedroom on the first floor. That's when the doorbell rang, twice. I hurried to the door, not wanting to be away from the game for too long in fear of losing. I got to the front door and said, "Who is it?" as I always would if I was alone. A soft and weak voice on the other side said something that I couldn't hear. It sounded like a woman. I opened the door, with the storm door still separating me and this older woman standing on the other side, with a big smile on her face. She had her hands behind her back. I said through the door, "Can I help you?" She said she needed to use a phone, and asked if she could come inside. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always taught not to let a stranger into the house, ever. That included women. I felt so awkward though, I didn't know how to turn her away. I redirected her to the library a few blocks down, because they'd surely have a phone. Deep down, I knew the library was closed at this point, but I was just trying to get the stranger who was trying to get into my house to leave. She was still smiling, but what she said next did not match her smile. She said, "That's very rude to turn away an old lady asking for help." I replied the only way I could think to, and that was that my parents don't allow strangers into the house. It's a house rule. I slowly started closing the door as I was saying sorry, and she just stood there, not moving but still smiling at me, and though her smile never changed, it suddenly felt much more menacing. I was walking back to my room when the doorbell rang again. There was no way in hell I was opening the door again. That woman radiated weird vibes from the start. Maybe something was wrong with her, maybe she wasn't all there. These were things I had no way of knowing, and maybe that was selfish of me to send her on her way, but I just wasn't opening the door for anyone when I was home alone. I went back to my game. Not too long after I sat back down, I heard something tapping on the window. It was a clinking type sound from something metal. The window was directly in front of my desk. I had the blind pulled down so I couldn't see what was making the noise, but I already had an idea. My room was the only room with a light on in the house. The horrible thought that it was the old woman from just before, and that she walked over to my window, terrified me. I turned off the sound on my computer. At this point, I didn't care about my game anymore. The clinking sound on the window persisted. I basically said, "Fuck this," and up and left to a different room in the house. I sat in the darkness of the living room for a bit, when the doorbell rang again. This woman was harassing me now. I tried to convince myself she wasn't a threat, just some crazy old woman who's probably clueless as to where she is. When she rang the doorbell a second and third time, I decided to go open the door and ask her if there's someone I could call for her. but when I opened the door, there was now a man on the other side. He looked to be about 10 years younger than her. He said through the storm door, "Have you seen my mother?" I replied saying yes, she came to my door just before. He then apologized to me and said she has dementia and got out of the house. I suddenly felt bad, but he asked me if he could come in for a minute, and again I felt awkward. Why did he need to come inside? I said the same thing that I told to the woman who we claimed to be his mother. I said we could just talk through this door. I then said that I think she went into my backyard because I heard something at my window. I told him he could go around back and check. He thanked me and walked down the walkway, and I thought he went into the backyard. But when I went to the back and looked out the back window expecting to see him searching around, I saw nobody. Not him or his mom. This was all too weird for me. I went to bed on the earlier side that night, just falling asleep with the TV on in the background, until I heard the clinking sound on the window again. Something metal was tapping on the glass. I remembered the concerned man, and I decided to try and help. I went to the window, lifted the blind up with my hand, and I saw that woman outside my window, with that same creepy smile. She was tapping a kitchen knife on my window. I closed the blind and crawled back into my bed. This didn't feel like it was actually happening. A suspiciously short amount of time later, the doorbell rang like 4 times. The clinking on the window stopped by this point. This was all too suspicious. It felt like some kind of robbery attempt. I ignored the doorbell. I stayed in my bed. I was gonna wait this out. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I wasn't the most social guy growing up. I also didn't want to call the police for some reason. I waited this all out until it finally stopped. The next morning, I told my dad what happened when I called him. He told me I was smart not to open the door. Everyone agreed that everything about it sounded like an attempted robbery. Is there a chance that maybe that woman really did have dementia and that the man was really her concerned son? Maybe, but it all seemed too coordinated. Why did he want to come into the house too? How did he even know she came to my house specifically? Why didn't he ever go into the backyard to look for her when I gave him permission to do so? Too many unanswered questions that lead me to believe I avoided something terrible happening if I opened that door. This was something that happened so long ago that a lot of details are a little blurry. It's not like it happened yesterday. I'll try my best to fill in smaller details that I don't fully remember with how I best remember things played out. It was the last day of school. I was in the 4th grade. 4th grade was the last year in our elementary school where kids had to be picked up by their parents. 5th graders were allowed to walk home on their own. My mom would always be the one to pick me up. On the last day of school, my friend Dennis and I had a playdate planned to celebrate the last day of school. Dennis wasn't in my class this year, but we had been friends since kindergarten. He was in a different dismissal hallway from me. After school was over, we single file lined up and walked to the exit door at the end of the hall, where we waited outside by our teacher, Miss Blue. I waited for Dennis's dad to appear from the crowd of parents shuffling in and out of the parking lot next to the doors. Then I heard my name. Tommy, Tommy. I look over and see a man waving at me as he approached. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and said he was picking me up. I went over to Miss Blue and said I'm being picked up. She asked, "Where is he, sweetie?" And I pointed to Dennis's uncle who waved at Miss Blue. Miss Blue dismissed me and I went with the man. He led us through the crowd and was a very quick and jittery talker, like he spoke fast and had a bit of a stutter. He was walking incredibly fast. It was almost hard to keep up with him with my backpack on. He explained to me that his brother, or Dennis's dad, was working later than expected, so he was driving me back. We got to his car, which was a dark red hatchback type car from what I remember, and it took me this long to acknowledge the giant elephant in the room. Where was Dennis? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to look at me in the back seat and said that Dennis was already at his house. I was shy around people I didn't know, especially adults, and I wasn't one to openly speak my mind if I was confused. But I was very confused. This was making less and less sense. The whole drive, the man kept yapping, telling stories of his days in elementary, asking me questions like what sports I played, what we're learning in class. If I had to guess, we were in the car for like 10 minutes, which honestly for our town where houses were right on top of each other, that was a while. My house was a 5-minute walk away from the school. We were definitely in an area I wasn't familiar with when he parked the car in front of his house. His house looked pretty normal to me from what I remember. He led us inside and shut the door and locked it behind us. It was really, really dark inside the place, and I realized why. All the curtains were shut. It almost felt like it was nighttime in there, especially because the only source of light was a dim lamp in the corner of the room. He then looked at me and smiled. I said, "Where's Dennis?" And he started acting really jittery and nervous seeming. He said something like, "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing video games. Give me a second. Wait here." He then disappeared into a nearby room, and I heard a door open and then footsteps descending into a basement. I know my heart was already racing. I knew I was in danger. I went to the door to quietly try to open it, but I couldn't. It had some kind of lock that must have needed a key for. I really started to panic now, yet I still probably held out a little bit of hope that Dennis would be coming up those stairs, but I knew the chances of that were slim. I regretted entering that house. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went to the kitchen and found a phone hung on the wall. I picked it off the receiver and dialed 911. The first thing I said when they answered was in a whisper, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." They heard me, they acknowledged me, but I didn't say another word. I hid the phone under a towel in the corner of the room with 911 still on the line. I hurried back to where the man left me as I already heard his footsteps coming back upstairs. Then he called my name, saying, "Come down, Dennis is down here." Then there was a pause. He repeated my name, and when I didn't answer, he came up the stairs fully to look at me. He asked me if I was okay. I felt so sick, and I was so scared. I hated myself for walking into this situation and not being wiser. I asked in a very scared voice if I could leave, and I remember the change in his face. His fake friendly smile disappeared as he realized that I was no longer falling for this. He walked closer to me in a gentle manner until he was close enough to grab my wrist aggressively, and he started pulling me towards the basement. I screamed and cried, and he screamed at me, "I'll let you go if you stop and behave." So I listened. I went down the stairs, and halfway down, the door slammed shut behind me, and I heard it lock. I walked fully down the stairs to this empty, unfinished basement with a concrete floor and one singular support beam in the middle of the room. There was a depressing yellow glow in the room from one exposed light bulb hanging on the ceiling. If there was a place you'd imagine kidnapped children to go, this would be it. I heard his heavy footsteps upstairs. You could hear everything in this house. I don't know what he was doing, but I heard him walking around for a while. Then he came to the basement door, opened it, and he called down asking if I'm hungry. I replied no. I didn't want him going into the kitchen seeing the missing phone. He shut the door and locked it again. I sat down there, waiting, with my heart in my throat, and then I heard it. The doorbell ringing 3 times from upstairs, followed by banging sounds, which were definitely the sounds of police banging on the door. I would refrain from screaming until I heard the front door open, but I never heard the man's footsteps approach the door. The doorbell kept ringing, and I kept hearing the bangs. This went on for some time, until I heard a really loud bang sound, and then multiple heavy footsteps and multiple screaming voices. I started screaming for help as loud as I could at the top of the stairs, banging on the door. The door was unlocked, and a police officer on the other side grabbed hold of me and hurried me outside. There were at least 3 cop cars outside. I had to tell everything to 2 of the cops outside as we waited for my parents to show up. The man from inside was brought outside and into a cop car in handcuffs, and that was the last time I ever saw him. When my parents arrived on the scene, my mom was bawling her eyes out. There had already been a whole scene at the school as cops were called and Dennis's dad realized what happened. This man was a work associate of Dennis's father. When he somehow learned that Dennis's dad would be picking up Dennis and I from school on the last day, he seized the opportunity to do what he did. A complete sick fuck. I don't know how he found out what I looked like. As I got older, I never really asked for more details because I try not to think about it. My mom went to counseling with me for months after this incident. Let's just say my parents didn't have kind words for Miss Blue, not verifying if I actually knew the person picking me up. If I didn't think to call the police before he basically threw me in that basement, I know for a fact I'd be dead right now. This was like 17 years ago. That man might be out of prison for all I know. It was New Year's Eve of 2020, and all of us were ready for this horrible year to be over. My friend Logan was throwing a house party. I arrived early to help set things up. I secured a spot to sleep in his parents' room, meaning I could drive to the party and drink without having to worry about driving home. His parents obviously weren't home for the night. Most of our close friends in our friend group came, plus a bunch of Logan's friends who I didn't know. The party was fun. At midnight, everyone screamed Happy New Year and cheers their drinks. After that, people slowly started circulating out and the party started to quiet down, as people went to either other parties, bars, or home. The later the night got, the more it became just the closer friends staying behind until it just turned into a chill drinking session in the living room. This went on late into the night. It was likely 3 a.m. when the last of everyone who wasn't sleeping at Logan's house was gone. As it quieted down, we started hearing this occasional sound. At first we didn't know what it was, but it soon started to sound like a creaking sound. It was dismissed as a sound from the fridge or something at first, which I know sounds stupid, but house appliances often make weird noises. It was just Logan, me, and Cody. Cody was falling asleep on the couch already. It was reaching that time where we were just going to go to sleep. However, eventually we got so bothered by the noise that we had to search. We went to the kitchen, and it wasn't coming from in there. We realized when we were close to the basement door that it was coming from downstairs. Logan opened the door, and we heard this creaking sound. "Go check what it is," I said. He kept saying no way. Then he called down into the basement, "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped, and we never heard it again. After a solid minute of waiting at the top of the stairs, we agreed to go down together. We both grabbed knives, drunkenly thinking that was a good idea, when in reality we were so drunk we'd probably only hurt ourselves with them. We got to the bottom of the stairs and looked through the entire basement. It's not huge. It just has a couch, TV, a bar, a table in the corner, and various old pieces of junk. It was pretty messy at the time. The first thing we did was search any possible crevice for someone who could be hiding. Then we tried to figure out what could have been making that sound. I noticed a rocking chair, and so I went up to it, sat in it, and then started rocking in it. And it made the exact same creaking sound we had been hearing. Logan and I looked at each other. I stood up, and so did every hair on my body. I don't think we ever ran faster than we did when we ran up those stairs and slammed the door shut. We tried to come up with any logical explanation, but there was none. He kept the basement door locked for days until his parents came back. There was no living soul down there, but something was moving that rocking chair. That rocking chair used to belong to his grandma who passed away forever ago, and it's just something his mom held onto for sentimental reasons. I can't say I've ever experienced anything resembling the paranormal before this, nor since then. It still sends chills down my spine. A user of a picture collection website shared a freaky find at his grandparents' house, more specifically in their shed, which hadn't been opened for over 10 years. He made the discovery during efforts to tidy up the entire area and remove junk. The house was built by the man's grandfather, but he says no one was ever made aware of this trapdoor. He took some pictures of the view from inside the hatch, and in one angle looking straight down, there appears to be an old sofa sitting in the room. He also managed to spot a passageway from the hatch, which connects to the barn next to the shed through another hidden entrance behind unused shelving. He said he was going to try to go into the creepy room, but backed out when he thought he heard a whispering noise coming from inside. A man who had recently bought his first home made a rather unusual discovery in the basement. He had bought the house for a steal, as the previous owner had passed away, though it came with a lot of work to be done. In the process of cleaning out some of the junk that was never removed by the previous owner, the new owner found something that he found odd. A piece of plywood covering a part of the wall. After prying at the wood, he managed to break it off the wall. What he found shocked him. A small room with many gun cases, military ammo crates, and a big gray metal container. All of the ammo crates were filled with bullets. The man said there had to be hundreds of bullets stowed away in that room. The most notable find, however, was a large safe, and it's unknown whether he was ever able to get it open, as there have been no update articles. An Imager user was walking around his house when he noticed a window for a room that he didn't know existed. He had a look through the window and saw this. He went inside to the only wall that was facing that room. Upon closer inspection, he found that this piece of the wall panel had been cut. What they found inside seemed like a lot of junk. The most noteworthy things found was some kind of gargoyle statue, a box full of Star Wars cards, and a locked safe, of which the uploader never updated on. Another Imager user by the name of 2Byte Brownie posted a few pictures of a secret room in his house a few years ago. While horsing around with his brother in their parents' room, the younger brother was pushed into what was assumed to be a built-in bookshelf. It opened, revealing a hidden room and evidence of a potential inhabitant. Moving on, as if this hidden room reached by a black spiral staircase wasn't creepy enough, there was supposed evidence that someone was down there, but the siblings found a crawl space halfway down and saw this. 2Byte Brownie wrote, "Someone was living in our walls. That's my Halloween candy that someone came in my room, took from my bag, and then brought back in here." About 30 seconds after taking this picture, we realized what it meant and got out of there. The fresh-looking banana peel suggests that someone had recently been down there, or perhaps it was a setup. 2Byte Brownie wrote in response to this that he had been eating it when they walked down to the room. Seeing the blanket in the dimly lit space, he tossed the banana at it. So was this a hoax, or was somebody secretly living in this home? Tony Smith had just bought his first house. Whenever entering the basement, he would hear strange noises coming from inside the walls. Strange noises like screaming, laughing, or moans of pain. The sounds came from beyond the part of the wall where no rooms were. "I assumed it was some kind of animal," Tony stated. One late night, Tony awoke to metallic banging sounds coming from his yard. He took a peek out his window and saw some kind of metallic door open from the grass as a shadowy figure emerged and ran down his driveway out of sight. He got a closer look at it in the daylight. It was some kind of hatch door disguised to blend in with the grass. Tony never went down there. He just sealed the thing shut before whoever was in there could come back. A group of shocked Ohio students discovered that the ghost haunting their house was actually a random stranger living in a secret room in their basement. The students had been spooked by strange noises in the night and mysterious happenings like coming home to find the cupboard and oven doors open. Upon entering the room, they found that a man named Jeremy had been living there for weeks. He was evicted and the students had the locks changed. In 2005, Jason and Carrie had just bought a house and were about to begin renovations when they found a secret corridor hidden behind a bookcase. Instead of holding torture equipment or treasures like they said they expected, the first thing they found was a note from the previous owner, saying simply, "You found it." The rest of the note said, "I've owned this place for a short while, and it was discovered to have a serious mold problem, one that actually made my children very sick to the point that we had to move out." The house was contaminated with black mold. When the previous owner lived there, one of the children he mentioned in the note had gotten so sick that she was unable to hold any nutrition and sometimes couldn't breathe. Jason and Carrie Brown proceeded to cancel their move-in plans, and they sued the broker who sold them the house. A Reddit user found a hidden room in the attic of their house in Norway. Some of what they found inside included a sign which roughly translates from Norwegian as, "If you have a bad stomach, then you don't have access." There was also a lamp alarm to most likely warn when someone entered the attic, a map of West Europe, and a doll's shoe. This secret room was likely a hiding place for a Jewish family from the Nazis, and the lamp alarm was likely a silent way of warning of a Nazi's presence in the attic. Reddit user Lumberjack years ago found a secret crawl space with a safe containing some treasures, along with some disturbing findings. Some of the treasures include a pile of envelopes with paper money of various countries and origins, along with a jewelry box with watches, tie clips, a key, rings, and a lot of gold and silver. The discovery that's downright disturbing features the tapes contained in the safe, one with the words "No, no, no" scribbled all over it. Along with the tapes was a note that read, "Save yourself." He turned the tapes into the police, and their contents are still a mystery. A student living in New Mexico was living in a single-floor house bought by his father for him. He reported hearing a strange banging coming from below the floor during one night on his first week. A few nights later, he found a door in the floor in his pantry closet. It led to a mysterious-looking room with a light on, along with a fan blowing. There seemed to be a desk with a few gadgets and a few cabinets. The design of the room was completely off from the rest of the house. However, the creepiest thing was the cigarette found on the desk that had seemingly just recently been put out. There weren't really any clues as to who was down there or what was going on. The first haunted house on this list is Dead of Night. Dead of Night was an attraction run by the Chamber of Horrors on Long Island, New York that closed in 2015. It was regarded as one of New York's most extreme haunted houses, and it had one of the most horrifying haunt openings many had ever seen. Everyone waited in lines listening to a calming pre-recorded message saying, "We are here for your protection.
Everything will be okay. You are safe. We are here to protect you and care for you. We love you. Nothing is real. All is well."
Which was interrupted at intervals by an air raid siren and men in gas masks and suits who each grabbed an unsuspecting patron and dragged them into the attraction. However, you'd be lucky if you were dragged in. Some people were zipped into body bags and some were thrown over actors' shoulders and carried in. The attraction opened with this very strong abduction scenario. Then the focus shifted to humiliation, which included the smearing of strange substances on patrons' faces and even hitting people in the face with large and painfully heavy objects. Dead of Night has been discontinued from the Chamber of Horrors, but people to this day still hope to see it return. In Chicago, Illinois, there's a haunted house called Miasma, which is just as extreme, if not more extreme, than Dead of Night. Miasma is restricted to those 18 and older, and patrons may only enter alone. Patrons will be restrained, blindfolded, smeared with blood, endure heavy physical contact, and more. It's invite only, however, and patrons who receive an invite commonly describe the instructions in the email to be very vague but clear, and that was to not share the location of where they're going with anyone, to show up alone, and do not show up late. If the instructions were ever disregarded, the experience would end. All guests are asked to refrain from sharing details of the experience, making it harder to get many details about what goes on inside. But some patrons have described their experiences to involve physical pain, often leaving with claw marks on their skin, psychological torture, emotional distress, and a lot of violence. Miasma can be very physically demanding, forcing patrons to sometimes crawl through tight spaces. One patron said she at one point forgot she was in a haunted house and tapped out when it started to feel like she was genuinely in a life or death situation. The location isn't even revealed to guests until 24 hours prior, and allegedly the location always changes. Scarehouse the Basement. Underneath the regular, tamer attraction known as Scarehouse in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, used to lie what was known as the basement at Scarehouse, which was a much more intense, immersive, and interactive experience than that of the one upstairs, and it was held inside a nearly 100-year-old historic and apparently actually haunted building. It's been closed since COVID, but it's rumored to be returning soon. You may enter in pairs or alone, though odds are not many people will be entering this place alone. The actors in this haunted house are incredibly convincing, and there's a lot of improvisation and dialogue as you make your way through each scene of what's basically your own personal real-life horror movie. It's not possible to make it from start to end without coming into contact and having to deal with the actors stopping you and messing around with you. There's extreme physical contact, sexual undertones, real electric shock, religious themes, very tight spaces, and much more. Like most attractions I'll talk about in this video, you must sign a waiver before entering. The basement can get so disturbing that the attraction appropriately has a safe word to yell out if a patron happens to feel violated or too uncomfortable. The Cult was an attraction located in North Conway, New Hampshire. The Cult had been called the ultimate in terror, only for die-hard fans of true horror, for those who want the experience of real-life terror to test your fears. It was an hour-long attraction and patrons had to walk through alone. Absolutely no groups allowed. Going through it, you would encounter violent situations, and the actors would lay hands on you many times. As the nervous patrons meet a man before entering the attraction who asks if they have any problems with darkness, heights, claustrophobia, eels, rats, bugs, needles, or being fully submerged in water, most of the patrons were already nervous of what they were getting themselves into. Patrons were given a red card on a lanyard. If one decided the experience was too much, they would give up their safety pass and it would be over. During the experience, patrons would be asked to step into a chairlift that led to a dirt path, which would then lead to a cabin where they would meet a man who would shove them into a booth, yell at them, spray them with unknown liquids, throw a bag over their heads, and then carry them outside, where the simulated torture continued. As patrons continued on, it only got worse. Throughout the attraction, patrons would encounter live animals, for example being forced to have snakes or cockroaches crawl on them, forced edibles, for example being forced to drink what the actors would claim as animal urine, extreme violence, and much more. The Cult has been closed since 2013. The Blackout Haunted House was an attraction that had two locations, one in New York and one in California. It featured extreme violence, full frontal nudity, forced edibles, submersion in water, physical contact, and patrons had to enter alone. Patrons were abducted in vans, waterboarded, and even rolled naked in a sheet of plastic and forced to walk barefoot down a hallway. Said hallway would lead to a scene with a horrifically tall figure and frail woman, and if I described the scene, this video would probably get age restricted. As a patron would pass, the tall man would stand up, exposing his body, and then threaten to make physical contact with the patron. Blackout overall relied on darkness, loud noises, violence, and sexual situations to terrify its customers. Until around 2015, it had been a solo-only experience, but starting in, I believe, 2016 or 2017, patrons were allowed to enter in groups. It seems Blackout hasn't been open for the past 2 seasons. Freakling Brothers Victim Experience 3 is a Las Vegas attraction featuring extended submersion in water, electric shock, and extreme physical contact. The Victim Experience is extremely intense, and you must go through alone. One patron said he watched a camouflaged attacker appear out of nowhere, grab his colleague by the foot, then knock her down and drag her down a long hallway as she screamed. He was left alone in the darkness until the attacker came back for him and threw him over his shoulder. Patrons will experience electric shock at some point, as well as the feeling of near drowning as they're submerged underwater for extended periods of time. As the title of the attraction suggests, once you enter, you are a victim. You will experience pain and you will be tied up, and you may be carried and thrown. Freakling Brothers actually run 3 haunted houses every year: Castle Vampire, Circus of Horrors, and Gates of Hell. The Gates of Hell became one of the first haunted houses in the country to be R-rated due to graphic content and the requirement of patrons to be over 18 and sign a waiver. The Victim Experience takes place in the Gates of Hell attraction, and it simulates what it would be believed to be like to die and actually go to hell. Without giving too much away, victims are put in several scenes where they're touched, forced to get down on their knees, and subjected to things that anyone would find uncomfortable. The Raven's Nest was one of the lesser-known extreme haunted houses, and it's been closed since 2009. It had been closed after it was deemed as too extreme by the town. Raven's Nest featured actors who were paid to induce pain on the patrons, as well as other humiliating methods of torture. The owner, Mike McNair, would hire mostly larger and more intimidating actors who would be capable of easily picking up, tying, or shoving patrons. Visitors would also be kicked to the floor and forced to do things like lick the ground, eat disgusting foods and liquids off the floor, and even have actors try to induce vomiting in the patrons. The attraction also played with claustrophobia, having patrons crawl through air vents filled with real cockroaches and spiders, as well as constant tight and cramped rooms and pathways. There was no safe word, which may have been a small factor in the eventual closing of the Raven's Nest. Many of you definitely have heard of this last one, McCamey Manor. This San Diego attraction, if it could even be called that, shouldn't even be in the same category as regular haunted house attractions. This place tops the list because it tends to use extreme scare tactics that are off limits to professional attractions. It also can't be said that what goes on in this place is safe. Participants are covered in blood, forced to eat disgusting things, threatened with power tools, stuffed in a clothes dryer, submerged in water for extended periods, physically assaulted, and even given an unwanted haircut. Participants often leave covered in blood, commonly their own, and so far nobody has made it through to the end. There used to be no safe word, and they would only pull the plug when medically necessary. This place plays with people's fears of claustrophobia with tight spaces and corridors, people's fears of spiders with restrained victims having up to or even more than 4 tarantulas crawling over their faces, people's fears of clowns, and just about anything else you could think of. Perhaps one of the more shocking parts is that the experience can go on for up to 10 hours, obviously a big contributor to why nobody's made it through to the end yet. For a long time the place didn't have a safe word, and Russ, the owner, only added one after he was told he legally needed to. But even with this safe word, apparently the torture can go on for many people who repeatedly use the safe word, rendering it basically useless. McCamey Manor also garnered a lot of criticism regarding the $20,000 cash prize that they promised to anyone who can make it through to the end, with a lot of people believing they simply wouldn't allow anyone to win, because oftentimes the workers will decide for the patrons that they're done, even if the patron wants to keep going. McCamey Manor is self-described as a place for extreme horror lovers only, who wish to experience what true terror and gross-out torture feels like. But apparently there are a lot of people who wish to experience it, as there's a waiting list of more than 20,000 people. There's currently a Change.org petition to close down McCamey Manor for good, with over 180,000 signatures. Thousands of people shun this place for claiming to be a haunted house attraction, when they believe it's simply a torture chamber under disguise. Russ's 40-page waiver is also very questionable, and he apparently misspells the word liable multiple times to attempt to make certain points of the waiver void. Whatever your thoughts on this place are, anyone would admit it's the definition of a horror attraction that takes it way too far. West Bengal, India has its fair share of allegedly haunted places, but perhaps none are as creepy or as intriguing as the Aliyah ghost lights. In the swampy marshes of West Bengal, there have been many sightings of these lights called Aliyah or jack-o'-lantern. They're described to be a flickering ball of light that emerges usually in the marshy regions of West Bengal and Bangladesh, and they've been attributed to being the cause of death of many fishermen. The fishermen community of the area have often spotted these unexplainable lights, and many believe that some of the fishermen were so transfixed after seeing the Aliyah light that they followed it and drowned. It's also believed by many in the area that these lights are the spirits of dead fishermen who lost their lives fishing in the marshes. These lights at times confuse the fishermen, causing them to fall in the water and drown, but also at other times, they may help guide them and prevent them from getting into danger. At least that's what locals believe. Aliyah ghost lights are not just limited to West Bengal though. They have been spotted in various places around the world, and these lights have long been associated with the paranormal or spirits. Some good spirits, some bad spirits. It's said that once you follow one of these lights, they'll flicker and diminish in size until they disappear, often causing people to panic and get lost. People have seen these lights all around the world in graveyards, swamps, and boglands, and they have been referred to as many different names. Anaya Carr from Siliguri was on the phone with her husband who was on a solo fishing trip, and when he had mentioned seeing a bright light glimmering across the marsh, he stopped replying, though the call didn't end right away. Anaya would keep saying her husband's name into the phone until it sounded like the phone was dropped, and then the call abruptly ended. Her husband was never seen again. In 2014, taxi drivers in Ibadan, Nigeria were starting to disappear, and while there was no outward evidence of any sort of foul play at first, people started to become suspicious when more and more people would disappear and mysterious-looking strangers would be lurking the area. Police were notified of the disappearances, but reportedly were uncooperative, refusing to investigate further and saying that the men had likely just run off. As the disappearances continued in the area, There was still no official response until a motorcyclist riding down a highway claimed that he had heard some crying out for help from the forest. On March 22, 2014, police finally went about investigating the forest, where they would stumble across a literal house of horrors. There, tucked away in the trees, was a seemingly abandoned building from which emanated a vile stench. Upon entering the building, they were met with countless decomposed human corpses, most of which had been bound with chains. As the search of the place continued, police began turning up other human remains in the surrounding area, many of them having been butchered and missing limbs, some of them even still bound with chains. There were also numerous human remains found scattered in the surrounding woods, stuffed within bushes, in the nooks of trees, or dumped into holes in the ground or into caves. The corpses and remains were in various states of decomposition, many of them missing limbs or internal organs. In total, over 20 decomposed human bodies and hundreds of human skulls were found in the forest, and there was a separate building full of only personal belongings of the victims, including licenses, clothing, and even children's toys. 15 people were rescued who were chained up in captivity, all severely malnourished. When police interviewed them, in most cases they could not identify the people who had taken them, but they described that they had been kidnapped, tortured, and kept in shackles with once-a-week feedings. However, a few claimed that the men who kidnapped them had been government officials, or at least were posing as them. The answers as to what exactly happened here have not been made completely clear, and it's unknown who took these people or where they went. And while some arrests were made, no one has been officially charged with any of it. On January 2, 2000, Zeb Wayne Quinn went missing in Asheville, North Carolina. Zeb was 18 years old and working at a local Walmart in the electronics section when he disappeared after finishing his shift. At around 9 p.m., he had plans to travel a moderate distance with his coworker Robert Jason Owens to buy a new car. Zeb met Robert in the Walmart parking lot before they drove separately to look at the vehicle. The two men were seen on surveillance footage at a nearby gas station at approximately 9:15 p.m. purchasing sodas at a convenience store. According to Robert, after leaving the gas station, Zeb signaled for him to pull over by flashing his headlights. Zeb told him that he had received a page and needed to return the call. After he returned from using a payphone, Robert described Zeb as frantic and nervous. Zeb told him that he needed to cancel their plans to view the car, and he eventually sped off, rear-ending Robert's truck in the process. Hours later, Robert was treated at a hospital for fractured ribs and a head injury that he claimed was due to a second car accident that same evening. No accident report was ever filed with police. The following afternoon, Zeb's mother Denise filed a missing persons report. 2 days after he was last seen, a man claiming to be Zeb placed a phone call to the Walmart where he worked. The man told Zeb's coworker that he would not be coming to work due to coming down with a fever, but the coworker recognized that the voice was not Zeb's. The phone call was placed back to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. When questioned, Robert admitted to making the phone call, claiming that he was doing Zeb a favor after he called and asked Robert to call in sick for him. During police investigations, a woman named Misty Taylor was interviewed, as she and Zeb had become romantically involved in the weeks prior to his disappearance, and he had told friends and family that he had been threatened by her abusive boyfriend, Wesley Smith, after he discovered that the two of them had been speaking. On January 6, 2000, Zeb's mom received a phone call from a former classmate of her son, who happened to be a coworker at the Asheville hospital where both were nurses, who told her that she had seen his car in the parking lot of a barbecue restaurant next to the hospital. Police examined the car, which had been left with its headlights on, but there was also a pair of lips and an exclamation mark drawn on the car's back windshield in lipstick, and a live puppy was found inside. A plastic hotel keycard was also discovered in the vehicle, but police couldn't find the source hotel. There was also a jacket that didn't belong to Zeb in the car. Police collected forensic evidence from the car, but uncovered no new leads. Zeb's mother believes that the car was placed there by somebody that knew that his family worked and lived nearby, intending that one of them would find it. A couple later called police to report that they had seen Zeb's car being driven in downtown Asheville before it was parked at the restaurant, and assisted police in producing a composite image of the person driving the car. Police later noted that the sketch looked identical to Misty Taylor. Robert Jason Owens was arrested in 2017 for the murder of Zeb. However, in his plea agreement in July of 2022, just last month, Robert's story went that his uncle Gene, who died in 2017, knew Misty Taylor's aggressive boyfriend and was asked to do something to keep Zeb away from her, and Robert said his uncle's remedy was murder. though he said that he played no part and only witnessed it. The judge accepted Robert's plea and sentenced him to 150 to 189 months in prison, which will be served concurrent to a 60 to 75-year sentence he's currently serving for the murder of a couple in 2015, which is an entirely different story of its own. Regarding Zeb's murder, no one can really know for sure what actually happened. On July 13, 2011, Rebecca Zahow was found hanging at the Spreckles mansion in Coronado, California, and she was